Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Are we ready? Oh, okay.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Pelham Board of Education of March 1st, 2023. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, just like to start off by thanking our business office and treasurer and all the administrators for coming tonight and all the hard work that's gone into preparing this budget. I know we're all committed to a fiscally responsible budget that supports the short-term and long-term needs of the school district and is responsible for all the taxpayers and members of the community. I think our first item is to appoint a clerk pro tem. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
Dr. Champ? Okay,
Yeah.
so I'd accept a motion to appoint Dr. Champ clerk pro tem.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so good evening, and I too want to thank everyone. Thank you, Jim and Jackie, who are just amazing. They just translate things to us in ways for us lay people that make sense, and that's much appreciated. Their work, I know, started, I think pretty much when we passed the budget in May, it starts again for the next year. So this is a long-term labor of love. And I said to Jim, this is a Super Bowl. He reminded me, no, it's just March Madness. So this is the beginning of our March Madness, and we're just thankful for them and the work that they in their office do. And as Michael said too, I'm thankful to the administrative team, the cabinet, the directors, the supervisors, the principals, and all the administrators who work so diligently on this to really start from the ground up and build a budget that is centered on the needs of students first and foremost. And I'm really proud of the work that they do and the level of detail and commitment that they have to it. So we're really proud tonight to come to you to start to present the first portion of it. This year, obviously, we're doing a little bit different than we've traditionally done, so thank you for the flexibility on that. We're also here tonight instead of up in the middle school library because Miss Sabia and I arm wrestled and she won. But we're excited to have Rosalind Wiseman here tonight she worked with our faculty today and some students, I believe, and she's with working with our middle school parents tonight up in the library. So we wanted to give them that space for that important work. So happy to move down here to the Alumni Hall, where some of you, hopefully some of you, I think it's your second time, some of you in here a few more times. But I was hearing Will reminisce about the fun that was had at the Candidates Forum. But thanks for adjusting for that too, and for our tech crew for adjusting to be here tonight. So we're really excited to dive in. Before we do, I promised Alex I would do one plug for our communications audit survey launched on Monday. So for anyone who's watching at home, we really strongly encourage you to take a few minutes to contribute to that. We've heard from the company we're working with, we've already had a great parent response, which does not surprise me. Pelham parents, definitely make sure their voice is heard. But we do want folks to please remember to do that. We will also be engaging our students in that. So thanks to the high school folks, it'll be facilitating that with our high school students. And our faculty, many of them launched today in faculty meetings. So thanks to the principals who helped to facilitate that as well. We're really looking forward to the feedback that comes from that and coming back to the board with a report in June. So excited about what that the insights that will come from that. So tonight, as we launch into the budget, again, go back to the priorities that we use, and that really is starting with students first and foremost. We always want to make sure that everything that we put into our budget is aligned with our strategic plan. It's helping to build us towards sustainability for our students, sustainability of the system as an organization, and something that is responsible to our taxpayers, as Michael has mentioned. So tonight, we've got for you a budget that is once again tax compliant. We've been able, since Jim and I have been here, and I think before me, since the tax cap came into place, the district has been able to come to the voters with a budget that is tax cap compliant. So tonight's budget that we're going to share with you, the total appropriations amount of that budget are $91,125,000, with a budget-to-budget increase of 8.17, which is a little bit larger than we've seen in recent years. And you'll see as we go through revenues and through capital expenditures, part of why that number is higher than it traditionally has been. The projected allowable tax levy increase within the tax cap, prior to applying some of the different levers that we'll be talking about tonight, would be as high as 5.86% allowable levy increase. But what we're proposing to the board tonight is a tax levy increase at a rate of 2.95%. As I said before, all the work that we have done is anchored on the strategic plan. And before we dive into tonight's proposals, I wanted to take just a couple minutes to take a step back and kind of see where we've been. And I know we had a chance to do this a little bit, I think it was during the mid-year report, but I thought it was important. And one of the things that I realize every year about schools, especially over time in schools, you kind of forget that new families move in, families move out, people move through the system. So they as parents, their children experience different things at different times. So folks may have come in to the district, I think back to when I started 6 years ago, their children may have been in elementary school. Those children are now in our high schools. So those families may not realize the changes that have happened in the elementary school since they've left. Or vice versa, new families to the community, like even some of our board members who got children in the elementary haven't yet had the experience of the middle school and high school and may not realize middle school, high school 5 years ago, 9 years ago to where we are today. So I wanted to, in a way, share a little bit more of that history and the story of our district and where we've been over the past 8 years of strategic plans, 8 to 9 years, because I think it's important to understanding the context of where we are budget-wise and programmatically, and that I think will help to lay the groundwork for what is being proposed as we continue to strive to provide the quality education that our community expects and that our children deserve. So if you step back to 2014, and that was Dr. Girizzo when he was here and the plan that was drafted then. I may have missed a few things here and there, but what I wanted to share here were some programmatic growth pieces, things that had implications certainly for professional development and growth, but things that also had implications for staffing. And I think as the board knows, last year when we were here, we were talking about the addition of the restructure of my cabinet to provide an HR position. And that really was the net result of a lot of this prior work. From prior strategic plan and now that's brought program that's increased the size of our staff that really has helped, again, to provide that program that we want for our students. So under that plan from 2014 to 2019, that's when the district saw the initial implementation of the FLES program, foreign language in the elementary school, initiated in second grade. And you'll see later that's now phased fully in. Also under that plan, that was the beginning of Mandarin as a new world language for the district. And that phased in as the initial group of students moved up. Also then was the implementation of the efforts to become an IB world school, which successfully did occur a few years later. With that was the addition of world language to sixth grade, which is above and beyond the New York State requirement, but it gave us components necessary for the IB program. So additional classes for students, meaning additional staffing. Certainly Math in Focus, full implementation that was in place prior to my arrival in the district, but that was from the prior work, that outstanding work that was done. IB, again, implemented at the middle school, a variety of, in addition to course changes, a tremendous amount of curricular changes, our community project, a lot of things that the building has worked diligently on. And those roots started back in that prior strategic plan. And my understanding is at that time as well, there was a district restructure of administration to shift into our current K-12 director model. And as part of that as well, to bring on some initial staff developers to help supplement that work, full-time in math and part-time in ELA. Moving into the new plan, a lot of that work that grew roots there then really flourished as we moved into the last 4 and will be 5 years by the end of next school year. So within that, you've seen the phase-in of Teachers College Writers Workshop, Readers Workshop, Science 21, and now FLES being fully all the way implemented through grades 2 through 5. So that really is a complete overhaul of the elementary core curriculum, if you think about it. ELA, math, science, and of course, social studies, under Dr. Thompson's leadership, has been maintaining work in that area as well. Not with the same programs necessarily that we're able to point to here, but that work has also been ongoing and evolving, whether it's current events, civic readiness, citizenship, et cetera. Aligned with that was the phase-in of responsive classrooms, so a tremendous amount of training of different cohorts over the last 4 years to really flesh out what the elementary, the structure of that elementary program looks like. We were able, after many years of looking for ways to do it, to finally implement ICT, integrated co-teach, this past year, or this current year that we're in right now, in 3 different grade levels. So that was seeds of that were started again the prior year, now expanding that into 3 out of 6 grade levels at the elementary. When I arrived in the district, we did not have a psychologist at every school. I believe we had 3, with 1 being shared across 2 schools. So now to have 1 in each elementary, plus in the this budget now that we're in this year, finally the addition of a social school counselor at the elementary as well. That work all works hand in hand with implementation of our MTSS program on the social emotional side, but with MTS specifically, the work really has been around looking at the academic interventions, especially coming through the pandemic. How do we continue to help students recover and grow in their learning? So there's been significant growth, which started before the pandemic. We recognized that we did not have enough interventionists to provide the level of intervention that we wanted for our students, especially thinking of our youngest learners at the K2 level, but even those that were at the 3 through 5 level, not enough staff to provide what we wanted. So we've worked over years to increase those numbers, as well as the board is aware. In this past budget, you may remember, we also were able to increase the ELA staff developer to full-time to provide that additional professional support for our faculty as they work to implement all these programs and meet the needs of our students. One thing, it's not necessarily a cost-driven piece. We did as well prior to COVID and finally got to implement it in its fullness. I would really say last year a bit, this year fully, a redesigned master schedule at the elementary level, which actually enabled us to find some greater efficiencies of staff. I remember at a certain point we were talking about adding a 4th FLES teacher. When we did the work with Michael Reddig, redesigned our schedule, we discovered we didn't need to add another teacher because we found a more efficient scheduling approach. So we've been trying to make efforts in that way to make sure that we're being responsible with the use of that staff along the way. Huge credit, and you'll get to hear from him tonight, to Mr. Sabalos and the incredible work that he has done from the time that I arrived here and the time that he arrived here to where we stand today in technology is just unrecognizable. I think when I came, we had 1 base set of Chromebooks that had been purchased through a grant from Senator Klein, and no plan for how we were going to get from there to where we are today. And where we are today is now K-12, within this elementary growth plan, but I'll say it here, K-12, a Chromebook for every single student in the district with a 4-year refresh cycle, meaning no student will have a device that's more than 4 years at any point in time. Plus, we have things like iPads for our kindergarten classrooms. Plus, all of our faculty have portable, whether a laptop or a Chromebook. We've got refreshed display screens in almost every classroom district-wide. We've expanded the footprint of the district to different offices that needed whole new infrastructure. So we could go on and on about the level of technology increase. I'm going to let John do some of that because he's got a great summary in his presentation. And that doesn't come easily. That's a tremendous amount of planning, foresight, approval, and support from the board. And with that is also come additional staff to support the infrastructure, the hardware, the software, and all the potential problems that come with the increased growth in technology. Another huge benefit to us in that area is we were also able then to bring on an instructional specialist, a teacher who's providing the professional development support for teachers in K-12, really, in implementing instructional technologies. And as the board is aware, thanks to the work of the K-12 Innovation Committee that was doing a lot of work around flexible furnishings for a number of years, pilot programs that were run through them, support by the PEF, we now actually have started to expand from a pilot approach in the current budget that we're in now to implementation of that starting grade level by grade level. So we've committed to that as part of our budget process. Moving up to middle and high school. Again, growth under the current plan We've added a STEM enrichment course to sixth grade, so students are getting an enrichment and additional support in sixth grade. Math skills in particular added to their, it's almost like an extra class. It is an extra class every other day, supplementing their current math class. MTSS, we mentioned elementary, also being implemented K-12, so work to add that, and also added additional academic supports in the sixth grade and the seventh grade. We've added a math intervention teacher this year, all to provide additional supports to students. Our Mandarin program expanded, obviously, from the roots in that prior year. Now it is expanded through middle school, and we'll see that again in high school. We're fortunate to be able to expand clubs as well. We really, I think the board knows student voice is incredibly important to us as a district. So as students have expressed their interest in clubs, so we have done our best to provide those. So adding GSA at the middle school. This year starting a history club, the ACES club that's been added, a variety of other clubs that have been added at the middle school. We were pleased in this current budget to add a social worker to the middle school. We had Sharon Charles. We maintained Sharon Charles, who's been with us half-time for a very long time. But we've added an additional social worker there to assist, again, with the social and emotional needs of our students in general, especially coming out of the pandemic. I think we all know the incredible work that the middle school is doing as a school of character around character education, so we're continue to support that work. And we've expanded, as was mentioned already, our one-to-one program through the middle school to where our sixth graders now take the devices with them as well. That wasn't the original plan, but that was a change that came from COVID, and that stuck with us. Moving to high school, we've seen expansion of STEM elective courses like data science and engineering, a variety of other courses. Expansion of college-level courses so that more and more students can access rigorous college-level courses, whether they want an AP course or not. This year, launching a humanities research class for the first time. We've worked to expand staff to meet enrollment needs as students requested, whether it was electives, whether needing additional sections of core courses, and you'll see some of that in tonight's budget as well, as we try to work towards staffing the building appropriately to meet our student needs. For a medium to smaller size high school, we have an incredible course catalog of choice, and that's something we know has been a value to our community and our students, and we've been pleased that boards have supported that through the years. Again, we've got Chromebooks, and again, it's the expansion here at the high school level as well in student activities, so things like unified basketball, something I think has been one of the most exciting ads that we've been able to bring on. Things like freshman basketball, adding additional stipends. Our track team, our track team's over 100 students, so adding the board supporting adding stipends so that we can continue to properly supervise those programs as our student interest expands. Excited to add bowling this year, and then even things, I know it may not sound like the most academic, but it's probably something that many people would sign up for if they were really honest. Retro video game club, things like that that are of interest to our students and get them connected to pro-social activities. Interact Club, that's a great community service club that's anchored out of the Rotary. So there's just some incredible things that have really grown in the district over the last two strategic plans that I think are worth noting and continuing to tell the story for our district of the rich offerings and program and supports it's providing to our students that prior boards and administrations have brought and have taken root and that have flourished. So I say all that to lay the groundwork for where is it that we want to go. We've had an opportunity to talk at our prior meeting about the vision of the high school. Tonight's budget is going to add a few more pieces to the puzzle of where we hope to continue to build on this foundation. So in this proposal, you're going to see some recommendations for addition of some staffing pieces. And those really relate to these items here. In the prior budget, we had added 2 interventionists with a contingency for a 3rd. We did use that contingency this year, and we are recommending the continuation of all 3 of those positions in the current budget. So whereas that contingency was funded through surplus last year, we're building that in now to into the general fund budget. We also are looking again to, as we have been able to do for many years, maintaining elementary class sizes at or below board guidelines. That's been really critical, especially coming through COVID, again, to make sure that our class sizes are at a level that our teachers are able to meet student needs. Within this, we're going to be proposing as well adding the equivalent of 2.0 in staffing. 2.0 FTEs is full-time equivalents for anyone who's watching who doesn't know that. And I wrote it that way because that's due to the number of students moving through the middle school. We need to add a few sections of students, a few additional classes at each grade level, which means that we probably need bits and pieces of each subject area. So probably like
Oh.
0.4 or 0.2, depending on the subject area. Because if you think about having 9 English classes across a grade level, but then the next year you need 10 English classes. You also need 10 science classes, 10 math classes, 10. So those little adds add up to about the equivalent of a 2.0 overall. So that's one thing that's built into this budget.
So how do you achieve that just practically? I get that it's 2 FTEs, but given that they're distributed, how?
There's a lot of horse trading.
Okay.
There's a lot of shared staff between the middle school and high school, is the honest answer to that.
Oh.
So a lot of the ins and outs, and actually it's a great transition to one of the next points. And the next point I had on there, increasing math staffing, that, on the actual ad there is looking at a 0.5. But then when you take the 0.5 at high school and what's probably a 0.4-ish
I
at
got it.
middle school, you put that
Yep.
together, now you have a full-time hire.
Okay.
So there's things like that that adjust. We
Yep.
also have many teachers that are dual certified across content areas to special education.
Mm-hmm.
So they may shift one year, they may be 50-50, another year they may be 70-30. So as those things shift, then we fill in with those bits and pieces.
Are most of
So-
our middle school teachers certified 6 through 12?
7 through 12.
7 through 12.
A few have an extension some have an extension to 6th grade. Some of our 6th grade teachers are elementary. So
I
that's
see.
also another complication when you come to scheduling. You have
Right.
to see exactly where those
Yep.
content areas and extensions lie. So Dr. Garcia always has fun working with the principals and the directors on those horse trading deals. So yeah, moving to the high school, as I said, we're looking to add at least a part-time FTE to help lowering some class size, offering an additional section of a sport class. At social studies, looking to add the equivalent of a 1.0 in social studies. Many of our teachers teach what we call overages. They teach an additional class, which is great in a lot of ways, but it also can be become very overwhelming and quite a bit of an overload. So we want to try to be more adequately staffed for the courses that we're running and not always have to depend on that overage from our teachers. And then also we're looking at this year, and I think I've mentioned it to the board, we're bringing in a consultant to help work with the high school team as Dr. Titone comes on board, looking to find strategic ways of, maybe some innovative ways of adjusting the master schedule for efficiencies, to maybe solve some of our logistical problems, space problems, lunch problems, and through that also to take a look at our class size, which we heard a lot about at the last meeting, and make sure that if things are designed well, we should be able to then balance well, which hopefully can, in not everywhere, I'm not gonna promise everywhere, but in many cases be able to balance the classes so we're not having big swings of some classes at max capacity and others really half capacity. There's a lot of different factors in there too. I don't want to broad brush it too much, but definitely taking a critical look at that to do our best to try to keep those sizes down where possible.
Love it. Who's the consultant?
Dr. Bowman knows the name of the gentleman. Chris Donnarummo? Yes. Doctor? No. Okay. Chris Donnarummo. But but Dr. Bowman has seen his work firsthand. He's very, very knowledgeable about Infinite Campus, which is our student information system where we build our scheduling. So we're looking forward to his work in the district very soon. Continuing on. So some more pieces that you'll be seeing in this. Moving to the realm of special education, a number of items. We are excited again to look to be expanding co-teaching. And to do that, we are recommending the addition of one FTE of a teacher, as well as an additional TA to support the model that we have been putting in place at the elementary level. At this point, we are looking for that to be at Hutchinson as well. That's where the need is, and that's what we've been trying to do, is design the program where the need is. We always work to try to to plan our programs to meet student need. So that was one recommendation within this budget, as well as adding another FTE of special education to support the needs of students who need a special class as well. And Tracy can talk more about that when she does her presentation at another one of our board meetings. Additionally, given there's been a significant increase in workload related to CPSE, which is our preschool Committee on Preschool Special Education, as well as CSE. So those are preschool students as well as students who come into the district, then CSE and 504. So just an increased number of meetings, whether it's initial requests, reviews, et cetera. So using grant funding, we're looking to bring on a part-time chairperson to assist with that workload. Also, we've seen, as mentioned in a prior meeting as well, an increase in our ENL enrollment. So during this school year, using some contingency funds, we brought on an additional ENL teacher. Actually, I think that may be on the agenda tonight for approval. Additional ENL teacher.
We're still in process.
Process.
We're in interview today.
Okay, thank you. So you will be seeing an approval of an ENL teacher at our next meeting. To meet the need, so we're recommending continuing with that position into the new budget year, as well as looking to try to provide more release time for ENL coordinator so she can devote more of her time to oversight and administration of the program. So we would need someone to backfill that. So we're adding some staffing in for that. Looking to continue to maintain all of our resources to support teaching and learning, which have been tremendous as we've shifted to a much more technological approach, and assessment-based approach. As well as continuing our work towards meeting those digital fluency standards that the board heard about back in October. As I mentioned earlier, I would just mention again for the sake of the budgeting ad, we have a refresh cycle for our devices. So within this budget, looking to have refresh Chromebooks at a couple grade levels. And then finally, looking to add an administrative assistant to support the curriculum office. You remember Dr. Bowman came on board last year. We did not have a clerical ad there. But as we've taken the year to assess needs in the office, we think through some reorganization of our office that we can cover some needs there. But what we've identified, the real need is to continue to provide more support for our directors. They had part-time support. We believe they really need full-time support, which will free them up to do that leadership of instruction and professional development that they really, that's their gifting and talent, and that's where they should be spending their time, and being able to have someone to support them to do the more administrative work that can be done by a clerical support is really important to helping them continue their work. And I think that hopefully will also trickle down to the staff developers also being able to pass some of that work back to a clerical to enable the work of those curriculum leaders to be in the classroom supporting our faculty. And one little bit more, moving into the exploring range here. We do, in this budget as well, want to continue the expansion of the flexible furnishings that had been budgeted this year for kindergarten classrooms, looking to move that up to first grade classrooms, looking at how to adjust that so that we make sure to adapt for the differences in our buildings, differences in the classroom layouts, et cetera. So Dr. Bowman's going to be working with principals as we plan for that, to try to get better each year as we do that on getting a match to what our teachers really need in their rooms. Excited to be offering a new course at the high school, astronomy. I already got a lot of buzz, and went through our Authentic Learning Committee, and we're excited to be offering that in the coming year to our students. Within the budget, I think it is of note, it's not an ad, but I did wanted it just to keep that on the radar. We did maintain the funding within the budget for the coordinator of DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We were not able to fill that this current year. We just were not successful in finding an applicant in the current model. But we're exploring potential ideas there, and just wanted to make sure that the board was aware and the community that funding is there, and we are continuing to look for ways to fill that position. As I've been speaking with the board throughout the year, we've been talking about a climate survey, and we've involved a number of union leaders as well as the administrative team in reviewing a number of tools. I'm working to finalize the BOCES contract on the one that was selected by, that rose to the surface by the group, and that is a core collaborative survey. So we'll be, Dr. Garcia is our champion on that survey. He's been working with them already to start the pre-planning on design, and we'll be expanding those planning efforts out throughout the spring. And we put in the budget to continue with that into the new year, because our hope is to really thoughtfully construct a great climate survey, to roll that out with our staff, and then to make that an ongoing annual activity in the district, and then eventually down the road to look to expand that to potentially students and parents. So, and this company, we believe, is one that can evolve with us as we go towards that. And finally, I forgot to mention it, but you don't have to flip back. A lot of this, and I think going through the history of where we've been and going through some of the other items that we're going to talk about later tonight, like facilities items, I think are really important. They're going to work really well together because within that last item that was on the slide was budgeting for a consultant to lead us through the next phase of strategic planning. So I bring that all up to say next year is going to be a really, really great year to be on the board because it's a year that we really will be able to set a strong direction about instructional program, facilities. Everything really is a good opportunity to come around and see how we align that. So we did put money in the budget for a consultant to help work with us through that strategic planning process next year. And you'll see in Jim's budget as well that there is money in this budget for a new building facilities conditions survey. Required to do that every 5 years because they've been changing a little bit around that. It hasn't been done in 9 years-ish. It'll be almost 9 years. It's the same, right now the one that we have is the same one that we used to do the last bond, which we now have a new school that is not in that same plan. So it's time for us to get that updated facilities analysis. Time for us to really bring, it's just a great opportunity to bring all those together as we now renew the strategic plan in the year to come. So, there's a little bit more. Turning towards safety, security, health, and in creating a welcoming environment, there are a few more items that we think are important to include in this budget as well. We've been working with Alteris for the last couple of years at half-time capacity. We believe the value that they've brought to our schools as far as their consultation on safety protocols, procedures, drills, perspective dealing with everything from assessing mental health crisis to dealing with lockdowns and everything in between. We think they've been just incredible value. So we've proposed to move them up to a full-time consultant as opposed to just half-time. We're looking to maintain our nurse coordinator position, which has been and will continue to be funded through our federal grant that we've received, part of COVID federal funding. Within this, Jim will talk a little bit more with us about, we proposed to appropriate some undesignated fund balance towards the budget for capital projects that would replace the middle school HVAC rooftop units, which are original to the building, and also would advance our efforts to update playgrounds at both Siwanoy and Colonial. And I should add, our hope and plan is to then build Prospect Hill into the subsequent budget year. So we'll talk a bit more about that later. I've already mentioned the building conditions. We will, of course, continue with our sustainability efforts that have been ongoing using our district staff, things like replacement of drop ceilings, LED lighting, maintenance projects, et cetera, and addition of controls to help in managing our energy. And I think with that, those are the highlights. I get the fun stuff, Jim gets the details. So at this point, I'm going to turn to Jim to begin to walk us through a revenue budget. Our hope is to kind of move pretty swiftly, thank you, that was the word I was struggling for, through the budget. So our hope is, I would say, if you can, try to hold questions to the end. Certainly, if there needs immediate clarification, by all means, feel free. But we're going to try to go through it and then really dedicate time to questions at the end. And two, we do want to be respectful of the time of the administrative staff who's been here too, so that they have their opportunity to come up and hear the line-by-line pieces. So I would say too, we can certainly reserve time after the line-by-line for us to have further conversation. So with that, Jim.
Chris, are you hearing okay?
1, 2, we're good? Terrific. Good evening, and here we are again. Like the late great Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again. Tonight, we're going to go ahead and go through with you kind of the nuts and bolts of the preliminary budget. And when you think of the budget, really, most people just think of the spending part, the fun part of a budget. But there are two parts of the budget, and the other part is how do you fund that spending. So we're going to start right now with the revenue budget, which is how would this budget be funded. And as we look at it, we're going to look at those different categories that you see that make up a budget. Of course, as homeowners and people who live in town, you certainly are very much aware property taxes, which make up the largest portion of our budget. It makes up 77.5% of the funding sources for our budget. Our state aid is the second largest category. Just a few years ago, we were about $6 million less than where we are. And over the last 3 years, we've received in 3 separate tranches full funding of our foundation aid. And this year represents that last tranche of that full funding. And Governor Hochul committed to that. And that's what you see in the budget this evening. The other budgets, again, we're made up of certain miscellaneous receipts, which again are increased nicely. Most of that is related to interest income. We all know what we've seen with CDs, or if you're borrowing money, what the cost of borrowing is, and that's directly related to the deposits that the district has and the investments that we can make. And then those last 3 lines talk about the appropriation of fund balance, or if you think about it, the monies that the district holds kind of as part of your savings account that are used to support this budget. So the total variance, or the total change year to year, is $6,885,000, and that increase of 8.17% that Dr. Champ talked about, in a total budget of $91,125,000. Look at it a little bit differently. You see the revenue budget in a pie chart. I think everyone in this room knows what Pac-Man is, and that's kind of what it looks like when you look at your property taxes. The property tax making up the largest portion of it at 77.5%. As you can see, appropriated fund balances are just under 5%. State aid, again, we're at 14%, which is a really refreshing number, again, as we looked at it over the last few years, and those miscellaneous receipts. So just another way to look about what I just described in the previous slide. But here we'll go ahead and we'll look at property taxes. So right now we're in the tax cap world, and for many people, tax cap is the only thing that they've ever worked with. And really, what the tax cap does is it limits growth to 2% or the CPI, and there are certain adjustments and certain exclusions that are allowed. Last year, the CPI is 8%. Again, going back to the bullet up point, it says it's the lesser of 2% or CPI. So we're not starting at 8%. We're starting at 2% as part of our tax cap calculation. There are certain exclusions permitted for capital exclusions for things like your debt service. And it also allows for exclusions related to TRS and ERS. So it's the teacher's retirement systems and the employer's retirement system costs that are in excess of a 2 percentage point rate increase. This year, those increases and a decrease, obviously we don't qualify for that, so that's not applicable for this year. And lastly, there's a small variance that you would see in there related to BOCES facilities. We'll talk a lot about BOCES through the budget process. Again, BOCES is a cooperative of which Pelham is a part of, and since we are part of it, that's why some of that financial information flows back through our tax cap. And really, very simply, we have a tax cap compliant budget that's before the board right now. For that budget to pass, you need a majority budget, so it's 50% plus 1 voter. If it's above the tax cap, you need 60% plus 1. That's not what this budget is. It's a tax cap compliant budget. And I think I said it's a tax cap compliant budget. And then if no budget is approved, the Board of Ed must adopt a contingent budget with the 0% tax levy increase. And then as you see there, $2 million impact on the budget, which would require adjustments either to expenditure reductions or increase of appropriations through fund balances. Mechanically, just that's how that would need to move forward in that instance. So here's a fun formula for business officials. It talks about the tax cap calculation. And again, I could just kind of talk about it briefly. At the top line, you see the $68,581,807. So that's the amount of tax revenue that the school district receives from taxpayers to support this year's school budget. Then there's a growth factor, which is a number that is assigned to us by the state, the Office of Real Property. And then we have those exclusions that we talked about. So you see there's net debt service exclusions and appropriations of debt service. It's trying to kind of make everything an apples to apples comparison year to year. So that readjusts your base to $66,419,394. Then we apply the 2% allowable growth factor that we just talked about. Not the 8%, but the 2%. And that then provides us with the tax levy limit before the exclusions. After that, what we do is we would apply the net debt service that you see there, and then net out any appropriation of our debt services. And then the combination of that 67,747, and then the three numbers beneath that, the 4.4, the 2 million, and the 1.5, net out the 72,602,518. So again, we have an allowable tax levy of 5.86, which is not what's being proposed, and the proposed budget tax levy increase of 2.95% year to year. And the tax, as you saw in the previous slide, the tax cap really looks at raising funds in two different categories. And part of it is your operating budget and dollars that are used to support the operating budget. So those are things like keeping the lights on, paying the teachers, running the buses for school events, sports and everything alike to run the day-to-day operations. And then the secondary portion is the capital budget. So as you look up those two portions of the budget, the 2.56 of that 2.95% is made up of the operating budget, with the balance of the 0.39% being part of the capital budget, in support of the capital budget. Things that we've had to learn over the last 12 years in budgeting in a tax cap era, and I know we talked a little bit about this when we talked about the long-range plan, but the district really wants to strive to keep our expenditures in line with revenue, recurring revenue, and to make sure we don't build program on non-recurring revenue. So we have limited controllable revenues, as you see. You have property taxes, which of course are subject to the voter approval, and the state aid formula, which was subject to the folks up in Albany. And then we do have fund balances, which we use to support the district budget. And they can be controlled and they can be used strategically. And I think the budget has been done, that's been done in years past, and it's no different this year. I think you'll see that as we, over the next three meetings as we review this budget. So assessed valuation is kind of how people are taxed. So you have, I'm gonna go back a minute. You have homestead and non-homestead. You're gonna hear that phrase. And I think really the simple way to think about it is a homestead property owner is somebody who owns like a single family home, and a non-homestead is a commercial property owner. And they are assessed in different ways. So, and that really depends on how that tax levy is split, is based on whether you're a homestead property owner or a non-stead property owner. And really, this is just a look over the last 9 or 10 years of what the assessed value of total property value has happened in Pelham. And then on the next sheet, what it'll show you is you'll see it broken down in each year. The tallest column that you see is the sum of the prior two columns, or the following two columns. The largest, the middle column that you see there in each of those years being homestead property owners, and that light blue color being your non-homestead property owners. But again, so that's kind of how you see the growth of assessed values throughout Pelham entirely, and then the growth of the assessed values by homestead property owners and non-homestead property owners. All right, so I see what we need to do if we're going to do this on a TV screen with the bottom example, but this is also found in the budget books. And really, what's the effect of the school tax increase on homestead properties? That's what people are going to be asking for, and we have a worksheet that people can, a little formula where people can figure it out at home if they choose to do so. Everybody's particular increase is going to be different depending on the assessed value of your property and the change of your assessed value of your property from year to year. So there's no exact answer for everybody at this table. It's specific to your property and those other instances that I talked about. But if you look at the top example that we have here, we have a home assessed at $600,000. And if your assessed value increased 5%, you would see actually an annual tax decrease of $266 year over year. If your assessed value increased at 9.84%, which is about the average increase in home assessments, you'd see an increase of about $229 or 2.08%. Now, Jim, a minute ago, you told me it's 2.95% for the tax increase. Why isn't it that? Let's go back to the non-homestead portion of the taxpayers. Every year, there's a difference in how much the non-homestead taxpayer makes up versus the homestead taxpayer. So earlier in this fiscal year, the board selected an assessment role which placed a greater burden on the non-homestead property owner, and that's why it lessens the effect a little bit on the homestead property owner. So that's why you'll see that variance. And then if the assessed value increased 15% and your home is assessed at $600,000, you'd see a year-to-year increase of $756, or 6.88%. Each one of these examples runs by the same formula, just kind of gives everyone an example at different values for different home assessments, so to give everyone an understanding of what that impact could be. Next, we look at state aid. Now, state aid isn't just one number. You see it's made up of about six or seven different categories, but of course the largest being foundation aid that I just talked about. In the adopted budget that we're in right now, it's $5.8 million, and as you can see, for the proposed budget, it's $7.9 million. So a really, again, just over $2 million increase. And again, this was the third installment of that increase. And going back to prior years, I think you heard Dr. Champ and myself and talk really a lot about how we were not funded fully at the state level. And it's really, again, it's great to see that because Pelham is receiving what they've been supposed to be receiving through this foundation aid for all of those other years. Then we have our building aid. Now the building aid is applied to the debt service for those capital expenditures that we talked about. So just as the 2018 bond, we borrowed money for the construction of the Hutchinson School, for the addition to Prospect Hill, the field at Glover, the new fields at Glover, the interior renovations on this site, the roofing on the annex. All of that, we do receive some building aid from the state in regards to that. It increased about $100,000 year to year. That should be the last. That should be a level funding moving forward. This was the last increase that we've seen as a result of that state aid increase, and we've received that in prior years too. So again, that increased about 5%. BOCES aid, you'll see again, we're going to talk a lot about BOCES being part of that cooperative. One of the benefits of BOCES is that for dollars that we spend on BOCES, the state then provides us expense-driven aid the following year, which is what we're seeing here. So there is some benefit to the districts to encourage the cooperative services that we have here. We talk about expense-driven aid. We have transportation aid as a district that doesn't really have universal busing. We still spend quite a bit on transportation. We have to transport students outside of the district, as well as we have one bus internally for the district for special education students. Then again, we've got instructional material aid, a minor variance that's based on student population. And high-tech aid, as I understand it, has been there, I think, since the 90s and hasn't changed a cent since that amount, but they haven't taken it out, so I'm not going to complain. And then all other aids, Jackie, help me.
Private and public access.
Oh, right, excess cost aid for stacking services for some of our high-need students. But again, year to year, it's an increase of just over 20%. I haven't seen these numbers before. This is really good stuff. Then you look at miscellaneous receipts, sales tax. So go back to 16 or 17 or 18, the district received about $700,000 a year in sales tax. In this upcoming budget, we're forecasting about $1.3 million. So certainly a nice increase that goes to support our students. We receive tuition. We have some students that attend our school, certainly New York City students through part of that agreement. We received regular tuition increase or fees from there. And then we also have some special education students. If we can provide a specialized service and we have capacity, we have the ability to do that as well. So really based on where we are right now and what the student census looks like, we're forecasting a decrease of $76,000. We have refunded prior year expenses. A lot of that has to do with arts and ed. The line beneath that is the real money shot, so to speak, interest earnings. Interest earnings have been at about 5 basis points for a number of years, or in that range. We're looking at between 4 and 4.5% right now. So if those rates hold, we can see ourselves interest earnings at this particular level. And here we just kind of give you another idea of all of the other items, which are utility payments, rent, smaller surplus. Remember, we ask you to dispose of a lot of equipment. We put it online, we sell it online, that's where it shows up. But again, this is kind of what makes up each of those items in miscellaneous receipts. And then we have appropriations as under other funding sources. You see the use of fund balances and reserves. So this year's budget, there's definitely an increase. The top line there, what the preliminary budget is asking for is an appropriation of that $2 million. And it would be a transfer for capital expenditures related to the replacement of the HVAC rooftop units at the middle school, and also for playground upgrades at Simon School and Colonial School to start with for next year. Again, this is something that you could tax for, and in this particular instance, the proposal is to utilize the fund balance for this. We're also proposing utilizing $720,000 from prior year surplus for a carry forward. We talked a little bit about pension expenses. Our ERS, our employee retirement system, pension rate increased. We'll see that in the benefits section, the benefit tabs of the budget. That increase is about $150,000, so we're proposing utilizing $150,000 from the ERS fund balance to address that. And then we have our debt service fund, which can be used to address your debt payments, and the proposed budget calls for using $1.575 million of that. So let's go back. So the total proposed budget includes $4.45 million in total of those fund balance. So that's how the budget is proposed to be paid for. The next thing you want to look at is where do you think where's the money going to be spent? Lots of little lines here, but this is really the line by line, or the top line by line of the expenditure budget. As you can see, 75% of the budget's on salaries and benefits. And we've said that year over year. That shouldn't be a surprise. Schools are people business. A lot of staff, a lot of people to educate our students, and that's why it makes up 75% that you see there. Then we have our contractual lines. So it's any number of different things related to consultant services, facilities items. We'll have all the detail on that for the budget line by line. We have BOCES services, which provides any number of services. Mr. Sabalos tonight is going to talk about the information services. They provide some transportation support for us. What else do they? Some VOTEC services for vocational education, just any number of different services. We're proposing that interfund transfer of $2 million. That goes back to the HVAC at the middle school and the playgrounds that I mentioned previously. And again, I think the other items are pretty self-explanatory of material supplies, tuition. Tuition's usually needed to address student needs that we have, and that's why it can change from year to year. Textbooks and equipment. But as you look at that line by line buildup, you see, again, it's an increase of $6.885 million year over year for the total budget of $91,125,000. Look at it a different way. From 20 feet, it's a little bit harder to read, but again, it's really about another way to look at it for a pie chart, and it gives you a way to look at it. So if the right-hand side, I think,
Salaries.
thank you, and then on the green it says benefits, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, that makes up 77% of the total budget, and you can see what makes up the rest of it. Look, and this is really by our object code. We're going to look at it a different way, which is by our function codes. So again, you have your instructional is the green portion of it. Then you have your general support, which is your blue function, and then all your employee benefits. And again, most of that is used to support that green function there as well. And then this is a state requirement. We've got to show the budget in 3 different components. We've got the instructional component, the capital component, and the administrative component. By state statute, your Your administrative component cannot be greater than 10%. We are not greater than 10%. If you took out the $2 million for the capital expenditure, we are still below 10%. So really, this is the categories. Where's the buildup for that $6.885 million? And this chart really shows you where those dollars are aligned towards. So you see 2.3, almost $2.4 million of that is related to salary and benefits for existing staff. And that takes into account, we know some people are retiring. And when people retire, they generally are retiring at a higher salary than their replacement. And we acknowledge that and we recognize that in the development of this budget. So this salary and benefit increase that you see year to year reflects that. Dr. Champ talked about the additional program and the supports and the initiatives and this is the salary and benefits for the new budget for the new staffing. You see that $1.245 million. Following that was the $2 million for the HVAC and the playground improvements. The next largest one is contractual utilities. I think we've all seen as homeowners the extraordinary variance in our homeowner and our utility expenses. I just got an oil bill last week, so I'm going to stop checking the mail. Maybe the bill won't come in. They'll find me. But again, so we are seeing significant increases in utilities, and it's not through a lack of effort of building controls and sustainability. We're not seeing an increase in our utilization, but certainly the rates are just are expensive. We have an increase in our contractual transportation line, primarily related to athletic transportation due to demand. And then you see the next two lines are related to special education services. One is special education services provided through BOCES. The second is tuition related to special education and charter school services. And then we have debt service leases, and this is related to GASB 87. So GASB, G-A-S-B, stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Boards. And this reflects all of the increases, all the spending that made up of district leases. So that's our office lease, that's our copy machine lease, and our postage machine lease. So they wanted to make sure we captured all of our leases as a debt service. So you'll see some of that here. It's a pronouncement that GASB put out recently, and it's all to make things very much easier for everyone to understand. So as you look at the budget, side by side, again, we talked about the revenues that make up the budget, talked about expenditures that make up the budget. And what this chart does for you is it kind of lays it out side by side and gives you hopefully a clear understanding of the differences in the expenditure budget and the difference in the revenue budget that's before you. Again, this is just really a summary of what I've already done, but I think it's a nice way of showing that we have it's balanced, right? You have to have your revenues match your expenditures, and that's what you see. That's what's before the board and the public. So I'm going to end where I started, or the budget, or where Dr. Champ started, I should say. So the proposal, or the preliminary budget, is $91 million, $125,000. It's a year-to-year budget increase of 8.17%. The projected allowable tax increase is 5.86%, which is not the budget that's before you. And this has a tax levy increase in the proposed budget of 2.95%. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Jim, I have a quick question. I'm glad you ended on those last two slides.
Yes.
Because I think that this is sometimes a hard concept to get your head around, like what's the difference between the 8.1% and the 2.95? So I think this breakdown is a good way to kind of see that, see under the hood. So if you could say, like, what are the two or three biggest components to that? I mean, in my mind, it seems like it's the increase in state aid
Absolutely.
and the $2 million in use of fund balance,
Yes.
right?
Yes. It's tremendous. Basically, again, like I said, I've been doing this for a while, and I started when I had all brown hair.
Yeah.
And I've only really experienced more of reductions in state aid than additions, and certainly nothing at this level. So this is just tremendous. Of course, my worry is what's going to happen the year after this one.
Right, so this is like
That's-
coming to parity, but we shouldn't expect to see this
Well-
next year. We've seen it for the last couple of years, but we're kind of back to where we should be.
I think we're
so,
topped
yeah,
off, and we
right.
should expect a plateau and more normal growth, I
Right.
think, in the best of situations. And it's certainly something to be mindful of, is the state's ability to sustain this level of funding as they wean themselves off of federal funding from COVID, because that's how the state has supported this level of funding.
I would ask, at this point, if folks have clarifying questions, I would say go ahead and have them. If we want to have some more substantive questions, if you could hold those, because I do want us to be able to get to the line by line and let the administrators head out for the evening. I don't mean to cut the
Sure.
debate
I do have
short.
a sort of slightly, I guess, broader question, so I'll keep my powder dry until the end.
Okay, we are here for you as long as you want us tonight.
Thanks.
Any other clarifying questions for Jim before we?
What was the increase in taxes last year? I should know that.
So it was 1.95? That was last year, yeah. I think it was,
It was below two.
below 2, and it wasn't 1.99. Mr. Mazzara wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
I think it was 1.95. It's in there. For the old Ragu commercials, the budget book, it's in there.
Yeah, I
And
just saw it.
and again, I think this is a good opportunity to share with the board this budget book that's before the board. It's been PDF'd. It will be on the website, hopefully tomorrow, very shortly. It'll be available for public viewing at the district offices. We make the budgets available at the library too. So, and we have 2 other budget meetings after this. Did it- 195. Got it. Yes, it was 1.95.
Regarding the salaries, I know it's our biggest expense, and of course, we care deeply about our teachers. It's a 5.42 an average, what happens every year? For the change, for increase amount, we're gonna increase 2.44, or, hold on.
Yes.
So on average, is that, or is it just because of the inflationary and hard to find?
There's 2 components that make up salaries. That's a very good question. And teacher salaries are made up of, they usually have a long progression from starting salary to top salary. And that's usually based on steps, or how many years of service. It also varies depending upon the teacher's level of education. So a teacher with 1 year and a bachelor's degree earns less than a teacher with 20 years and a doctorate. So depending upon our teacher census and where they rest within that matrix, we have one increase that's made up of their step increases. And then following that, there's a cost of living increase applied to people who would be at the top step. So this year, there is a cost of living increase. So this is the step and a cost of living increase based on the census that we have with us right now.
Just related to that, I have one question. So when we were talking in the general overview that you gave about additional FTEs,
Yes.
some of it is in the form of an actual teacher plus benefits, whereas other FTEs that you've collapsed together may be like various additional preps for teachers who are already receiving
Right.
benefits, right? So is there a document somewhere in here that I maybe didn't find, or a way of understanding like what the health benefits impact is to the number of FTEs that we're adding to this budget versus?
We can provide you all
Okay.
of that backup, but what we have as we look at, we'll have an evening for staffing, but we talk about staffing, and then we talk about overages. So there's a difference between the two. So as you mentioned, if we have a teacher who has a full load but then agrees to teach another class, they can be compensated through an overage, which is more pay, but there's no benefit attached to it.
That wouldn't be seen in what you described as an FTE,
You
though?
would see it
Like where it was-
you would see it as an overage.
Okay.
And then other times, as Dr. Champ mentioned, you could have a teacher who's teaching 2 classes, and maybe we need to add 3 more classes someplace else. Now, we may find ourselves, that's why you're probably looking at that increase of the 2.0s, because every year, in my experience, we've had overages in those core subject areas. So when you look at that, along with the increase in your student population moving up through the middle school, that's probably where you'll see that come to fruition. And I think part of that deals with finalizing the schedule and what your total offerings are.
And just as a reminder, that a part-time teacher doesn't receive health benefits, correct?
At certain levels, so if.
Like a 0.5 or
Dr. Garcia, I'm calling a lifeline.
0.5.
At
0.5 and above.
Thank you.
0.5 and above, they receive benefits, just
Gotcha.
like as under 0.5 FTE.
Can you repeat that, Mike?
Sure. What Dr. Garcia shared was that at 0.5, a 0.5 teacher would be eligible for benefits. Lower than that, no. But, so 0.5 and above eligible for benefits.
And I would say too, there will, throughout the budget process, we're also working on the staffing and scheduling. They don't necessarily line up
All perfectly
exactly.
aligned.
So there could be some evolving of some of those staffing proposals from where we sit today to where we sit at budget adoption, and then what actually gets filled.
It seems like that's one of the biggest
Yeah.
variables, other than state funding, which we have some more vision of than we do in years past.
Well, again, great point. The state budget is due, or by statute, should be finalized on April 1st. Generally, it's been finalized by that date or around that date, which is before the time the board sets the final budget. So we'll update that information. To the PPS group, they're doing their annual reviews. We may have students come, we may have students go. If students' needs vary, we want to make sure we address that as we work ourselves through the process. Later, you'll hear me talk about transportation. We're out to, BOCES handles our transportation for out-of-district students. They are out to bid right now. We put a 15% increase year to year. Neighboring district just went out, they came back at 37% increase year to year. So BOCES is working hard. They've mailed it out to 20 different vendors, and that's transportation's another night. But those are types of things that may come about, as well as the discussion and things that come out of this budget process.
Quick question for Jackie. I don't mean to put you on the spot, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine. Page A37 in staffing, that's got the overall FTEs for at each of the levels. Does that include the overages in those FTE counts?
Oh, we just have to use the staffing,
That's-
sure.
Yeah, it's just not it's not specifically separated out.
That's what I was trying to figure out. It's
That's
like
what I knew
I
where
was
you're
trying to
going.
like, when you were like, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then it
Jim, I
adds up
think last
to.
year, one of the things we did is you gave us a net new number. So
We did.
net new heads in the budget, and so it was
Yep.
just an easier way to look
We can
at
put that. It's included. Okay.
It's in there.
how much, okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm sure I missed it.
Yes, A37.
It's a lot in there.
Okay.
I think we can probably see it also on the secondary sheet.
I'm sorry, Jackie, if it's more than a yes or no, can you flip to the mic?
Just tell me.
Just saying.
Yeah, it's in there.
The overages will be more calculated on the secondary sheet.
Okay, so you'll see the overages more on the secondary sheet, which is page
Page 38.
A38.
I'll dig into this.
This extra period coverages.
And as you look at it, you'd look for it, the extra period coverages.
There it is,
Thank you,
towards the
Jackie.
bottom of the first section on A38.
I gotcha.
And when we get to staffing, again, I think we tried to give it to you a couple of different looks, budget to budget, actual to budget. We've got some historical numbers. And it's a good time to look at those things when we go over staffing, because again, that's where your dollars flow.
All right, I think probably good if we could move into,
I was gonna say, so this evening, we've got 3 groups, teaching and learning. Dr. Bowman, then Mr. Sabalos, the distinguished Mr. Sabalos, not that Dr. Bowman is not distinguished. And then we have athletics following that, and Chris Hodge is unable to make this tonight, but we've got some backup information. We can certainly review it, and if there are questions, we can come back to the board.
great. Yeah, there's a basketball finals, and he's a member of the committee, the section basketball committee.
It used to be bowling that in
I
there.
know.
There's always
It's a good
an
part of
athletics.
having athletic directors who are involved in,
Yeah.
in the section events. It's good representation, but it presents conflicts. Okay. So,
All right, so first let me
This
check.
would-
Chris, am I
this
good?
will be-
Fine, and if it's only PowerPoint, feel free to shut that laptop and do your papers around that.
I'd like to consider continuing to show our gratitude.
Thank you.
Perpetuity. So thank you. There, I did it, I read it. So, you know, I want to highlight that this year's budget does support the work that we've done and continue to do in advancing authentic learning, the whole child, and cultural competence experiences through participation in special programs, professional learning experiences, and teacher curriculum development. As part of our strategic plan, as you know, authentic learning is surrounded by the ideas of developing innovative problem solvers, critical and creative thinkers, effective communicators, and strong collaborators. When we discuss our whole child, we discuss deepening our systemic academic and social emotional supports for the health, safety, and well-being of the whole child, and recognizing that our learners need to balance academic, physical, social, and emotional demands. In the realm of cultural competence, you'll see that cultivating an empathetic, inclusive, and equitable school community that values and encourages respect, voice, and agency for all students really does encompass all of the decisions that have gone into the creation of this year's budget from the curriculum and instruction perspective. So if I could just go through some of the codes with you, I'll start with the 2010-145 code. The Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Code. It funds teacher curriculum development and professional learning outside of the school day, specifically in the arts, phys ed, and world languages. Additionally, this code supports similar efforts in ELA, for example, our TC program, which Dr. Champ referenced earlier regarding our Readers and Writers project. We also have done and continue to support work with math, science, specifically in Science 21, and in our social studies program from K through 12. The promotion of authentic learning in the middle years program from IB, which you all were able to participate in the most recent recertification for. Our curriculum events such as the K-5 Math and Literacy Nights, the PEF Exploratorium, and Math Enrichment experiences also stem from this budget code. Our focus on the whole child has increased the need for supporting curriculum development and professional learning in MTSS, academic intervention, and our L services. So you'll see significantly proportionate amounts of money regarding things such as branching minds. We plan to expand on the pilot innovative learning environment in terms of our furniture expenditures in the elementary level, as Dr. Champ mentioned before, and that would be how you represent the increase to code 2010-200.09, which is instructional equipment. That's for our K and up. So this past year, we outfitted our kindergarten classrooms, and we're moving up to the first grade. Moving along, I want to highlight our A1920-400 code, which is our school association dues, the contractual area. This is shared with the superintendent's office and reflects memberships in such organizations as NISCUS, ASCD, NSBA, which is the National School Board Association, AASA, which is School Superintendents Association, as well as NSBA. Our next code that I want to focus on is the 2010-419 code, which is curriculum with miscellaneous contracts. This allows us to contract with experts in the field, such as in the past, Jim Wright with MTSS, but also the work that we do with Branching Minds, coming up with Mr. Donnarummo, as well as for scheduling, Michael Redding moving forward with scheduling to revamp the secondary schedule, hopefully moving forward, as well as with Teachers College. When we look at the 2060-400 code, which is research, planning, and evaluation, this is our main funding source for professional learning and travel conferences for everyone in the organization, and it includes such things as IB, AP, ASCD, ISTE, education policy, and of course, public relations.
All the letters.
What's that?
All the acronyms.
Yes, the alphabet soup. This is the alphabet soup code. Our 2070-403 code really deals with in-service training and professional growth, and that includes funding for our unit contractual continuing education coursework, and that's based on contract. The 404 code under that same area enables greater flexibility for in-service learning, such as world language assessment development in the past, the arts, phys ed and health, pupil personnel areas, and things of that nature. The 2010-406 code, which is teaching and regional associations, enables the district to remain current on educational trends as participants in professional learning organizations, such as NISMA, which is New York State School Music Association, LHCSPA, which I don't have a way of saying as a word, so I had to say the letters, which is the Lower Hudson Council of School Personnel Administrators, of course, the Tri-State Consortium, Lower Hudson CSS, I don't remember. Anybody? CSS?
Social studies?
Council for the Social Studies, yes, thank you. The Lower HUD Ed Coalition.
It might be CSA, it might be a typo. CSA is Chief School Administrators.
Okay. Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES Curriculum Council, the Society for Human Resources and Learning Forward. The 2110-430 code does fund our graduate student internship program, where we set aside funding for 10 interns. But you'll see when we go through a little bit further that this year we did have some struggles filling those spots, but we maintain the funds so that we are perennially hopeful that we will be able to fill them in the future and want to be able to support that. The 2010-456 code funds mandates from federal and state legislation, including ESSA and APPR. This funds also the instruments, the data, the equipment and services such as Ames Web Plus, reading assessments, futuristics research, LifeTrack services, Riverside scoring, and of course, Scantrons. Our textbook codes are split into elementary and secondary, and they support new and also existing district-wide initiatives, including, of course, our math and focus workbooks, world languages, new coursework in grades 6 through 12, leveled literacy kits, classroom libraries, and expanded text resources that support our current strategic plan and will help us with the planning for our new strategic plan. Specifically, if I could just go through a couple of items in a little bit more depth, I want to, just give me a second to get to the page.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if you could let us know which page.
Yeah.
Mm,
I thought I would just make you jump around a little bit. If you go to, for starters, to page C9, just to highlight some changes that might hopefully answer some questions before you realize you have them, or maybe after the fact. So when you look at the 419 code on page C9, you'll see that there is an increased budget to budget of 22.9%. Certainly, a lot of the increases in costs associated do have to do with inflationary increases. However, in addition for us, this is due to, as it says here, responsive classroom costs. Also, our partnership with Branching Minds, as well as the development of curriculum for astronomy in here. So, certainly the increase here of $14,906 does support those initiatives. Moving ahead to page C11. Actually, if you could just move to the next page, sorry, my apologies.
And actually, I'll add in here too, if the board has any, clarifying questions along the way, feel free to ask those right when we're on the relevant page.
Yeah, sure, sorry. Okay, so page C10, you'll see from year to year, there are some changes here that I want to point out in the supplies and materials section, because some of the codes have gone from 0 to a number, a few thousand, which is whenever you go from 0 to something, that's a question. And this harkens back to some of the COVID surplus that existed when the schools were closed. There would be supplies and materials that clearly wouldn't have been able to be used from the main office. That created a surplus which has been exhausted. It wasn't evenly distributed across the buildings, and so some of this is a reversion to what you would have seen more historically. Additionally, in the building budgets, what's important to note is that there is a per pupil expenditure that's created equally across the district by level. So there's an elementary per pupil expenditure and a middle school and a high school However, specifically at the elementary schools, it's important to note that those are adjusted based on identified student needs in each of the buildings. And so there is a formula that's utilized to ensure that there is equitable distribution of funds, but there is a basic per pupil expenditure that starts the process.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we do ask our building principals every year, and they do a phenomenal job of it, to even though they're giving a building allocation, to still take a zero-based approach to budgeting. And they do a great job of distributing that across to meet student need. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach. So an equitable allocation based on the level of student need. And the business office uses, I think it's the standard federal demographic indicators to create that weighted student allocation. And then the principals take it from there and fit it appropriately into their building's needs. And there's a lot of, I would point out too, I know Michael and I have had some conversation, there's a lot of scrutiny done at that level, at the building level, about what those actual needs are within the building. So I just give them a lot of credit. I'm sure that's always, it's a very tight area of the budget for them.
Alice, I have a
Yeah.
question for you, but maybe
Okay.
it's on the next page. Are you going to C11 for anything?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you go and then I'll ask.
Okay.
Maybe you'll talk.
The most significant change on page C11 is in the 2070-150 code. And really, and that's indicated here, our instructional technology specialist salary was budgeted in a different area. And having that shift over to here does present as though there is a significant increase, but in fact, it's just a shift from one place to another. Your question was?
Oh, my eye lost where it was on here. I saw something about training related to regents, something. Where did that go? Is that on the previous page? Oh, maybe that's what it is. Oh, yeah, it's thank you, Jim, the 2060 code note that you had. So we spent time at our Authentic Learning Committee meeting talking
Yes.
about a few things related to Regents reform. Is just the support of
Yes.
the more online testing and
Yeah.
training.
So, yes. So at our most recent Authentic Learning Committee meeting, Mr. Sabalas and Mrs. Delmastro did a phenomenal job of explaining to the committee some updates in computer-based testing that will be coming down the pike. On the net, I think over time, the costs associated with these assessments will go down because of things like no need for paper, for example, if everything's computer-based. And that's on both ends. That's on our end in terms of administrative manuals and things like that that are typically printed, but also on the state side, because if they're not printing tests, then they're not charging us for the printing of tests as well. But for the time being, we need to make sure that everyone is prepared to do this, so that the information that those assessments provide is reflecting the skills and knowledge of the students and not their facility with highlighting and clicking between windows on a Chromebook, right?
And the content and approach to many of our subjects have changed and are going to continue to change. So I'm assuming this specifically relates to training.
Yeah,
teachers,
and so
supporting
the second
teachers.
part of our Authentic Learning Committee really did deal with the changes in the Regents exams as they're coming down the pike. And the overarching theme, if you were going to do like a theme and variation as new Regents exams are being implemented, is that it's a much more authentic-based approach, which really does require students to be able to use the knowledge that they have, use skills that they have, and it's less rote memorization. It's less stick it in the brain and make it come out of the hand. It's more being able to use information and knowledge and skills in a way that's going to be applicable in multiple settings. And so there is a shift in the way that teaching is happening, and it's happening. This is it's in process, but it's certainly going to be continued for sure.
Thanks.
Okay. The next page is really about salaries, and so I'm going to leave that to my friend Dr. Garcia to talk about when we talk about staffing, unless there are any questions that you think might be answerable by me now on page C12. We're good? Okay, so on page C13, a few things that I want to highlight for this budget year. You'll see that 2010-401, towards the center of the top, we have significantly changed the budget for IB, and that's as a result of our decision to continue very strongly with our IB middle years program, but to move it in a different direction at the high school. When you look down at the 430 section, you'll see that's where we talk about our interns. And as I said earlier, we were unable to fill all of our intern positions, but we remain perpetually hopeful and therefore prepared to fill those positions in the future.
By how much were we unable to?
I want to say we had a 3.
Yes, it's been pretty bad.
Okay.
Yeah,
The interns?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this year's 3. But it's been bad for the past 5, 6 years.
Yeah. But hope springs eternal.
Can we just go back one, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Bowman, to C12 for a second? Just I wanted to, for the board's clarification, stipends, those are based out of contractual stipends, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, some of it's hourly, there's a whole section on stipends.
Okay, right, so there's more backup, should you want to see that in the stipends? Okay. So a lot of those, and I guess I wanted to point that out, really to kind of more make the point that most of what is on this page, you're talking teacher salaries, elementary, secondary, stipends, those are really contractual obligations. So that all is very specifically driven by our collective bargaining agreements. Mandated home instruction, that can be a variety of items there, after school and homebound student instruction. And Ms. Holtz will correct me if I'm wrong on this. This could be for some suspended students as well as potentially homebound students in this area. But I believe there's additional funding in PPS.
Separated it out this year, just try to
Right.
track it a little bit better.
Right.
But this,
I'm sorry, Dr. Chair, I just want to remind our administrators, if they're in the audience, they won't be heard by the public.
I'll translate.
She'll repeat it for you. Thanks,
Ms.
Chris.
Holt said that they separated it out a little bit more this year so that they could track the differences
tracking.
between
Yep.
mandated home instruction due to
We separated it, general education.
general education versus special education mandated in home instruction service fees.
Correct. Thank you. And again, that's driven by regulation in student program. So if a student is suspended out of school, they're entitled to, if they're an elementary student, 1 hour a day of home instruction. If they're a secondary student, 2 hours a day of home instruction. We handle that a variety of different ways. That will be changing in the coming year.
The state is increasing
Yeah.
that as of July next year.
Correct.
So as of July, that's increasing for folks at home.
The hours that are,
Yeah.
we are
Right.
required to provide for students who are in homebound instruction.
The hours that we're required to provide for students who are on homebound
Either keep it short or
instruction,
go to the mic.
Whether it's medically based or suspension.
Right.
whether it's medically based or suspension
Okay,
based.
and we'll talk more about that when we go through PPS. Thank you.
I'm about to start
you.
repeating what you say too, so we need to
And just one question on the size or the rate of the salary increase in elementary versus, K to 5 versus 6 through 12? Is that just the 6.1% versus 4.5? Is that just because more
Depends on who's
experience?
in the system, right?
I think it goes back to that answer that Jane gave, where people are on the scale.
Yeah.
Our salary scale does not differentiate between elementary salaries and secondary salaries. It really goes back to, as Jim said, years' experience
Yeah.
and education level. Those are the predominant pieces. So it just happens to be
Okay.
Who's at elementary versus secondary?
But that's
exactly.
also adding positions, right? I mean, because there's 2 middle school.
Yeah, the numbers reflected
Social
here would be
studies
inclusive
teacher.
of all the proposed additions. Yes. Correct. That's correct. Thank you.
All right. So being that we've gone through page C13, are there any questions there? Okay. So then C14. The first thing I want to do is point your attention to 48001, which is the text adoption at the secondary level. And the reason I want to do that is because there's some fluctuation that I want to make sure is clear. In the 21-22 actual expenditure column, you see that it was at 6350, which is well under what was budgeted. That's due to the timing of when purchase orders were likely submitted, and so they were submitted under the following year's adopted budget, which would explain why the adopted budget versus the expenditures for this school year are not in alignment. And so next year's proposed preliminary budget of $28,000 in that area, while it does look like a $16,000 decrease in expenditures, is actually a flat budget based just on timeline of when purchase orders were submitted. What I also want to highlight on the elementary level is that we are looking at some increases in textbook expenditures, and of course that's due to the increase in focus on math, not the focus in math curriculum, but our focus in Pelham on math, as well as renewing licenses in social studies for our 6th grade textbooks. Again, I want to point out to the board that one of the things that we're looking into is that this is a 5-year license. However, the textbook companies often require that you pay it all up front. And so we're looking into having there be somewhat of a payment plan so that the entire expense isn't felt in year 1, but rather is something that we can look at over the course of a few years. So there's a potential for some of this to be decreased at the secondary level as well. All told, our teachers' college budget is about $70,000 and foundations is about $5,000 in this budget code. Any questions?
Right. You mentioned that textbooks have a 5-year license. How does that work? That's kind of
So they're
interesting.
very, even if a textbook is, if there's a paper copy, there's always a digital component and it's sold by license. And so you get a certain number of licenses based on enrollment, and the licenses expire after a certain amount of time. And so you buy them in 5-year increments.
Got it.
All right. Thank you. If you have questions at any point in time, you know where to find me. I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. I think at this time, we'll invite Mr. Sabalos to come and review the technology budget with us.
You're able to call out Mr. Sabalos' honor that he was making
And while he's setting up, just want to make sure that the board is aware and the public that Mr. Sabalos was just recognized for the Lyric Tell Award. Technology, what is,
Can you tell us what TEL stands for?
thank you. Technology, Education, and Leadership. Learning. Thank you. Mr. Berkowitz shared this with the faculty today. Technology, Education, Leadership, and Learning. It is a transforming. Well-deserved, and I think that's a regional award that's given by our Lower Hudson Council. So thank you to those that thought wise enough to honor, to submit his name, because he's very well-deserving. And we're excited, we'll be excited to celebrate him. I think that dinner is March 23rd, thank you. So we look forward to being there to celebrate him as he represents our district and the incredible work that he's done.
Sorry, I promise I know what I'm doing.
I'll take your award away.
I don't know if that feels so reassuring for all of you, but I know what I'm doing here. All right, so let's go over to here. Sorry, I have some notes up here, and we'll get started. I promise I'm not going to dwell on stuff, but it helps if you have, sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to not speak into the mic here. It helps if you have a little bit of a narrative so that we understand where, what we're trying to do, what we're planning for as we move forward into the next school year. So just an overview for tonight of what we're going to go through. It'll be in 6 steps. We'll try to make this as quick as possible. I always throw up a quote up there from an author or something we're studying. It's from George Kiros. It states if we want to do better things for students, we have to become the guinea pigs and immerse ourselves in new learning opportunities to understand how to create the necessary changes. We rarely create something different until we experience something different. I think that's a really good quote that brought us through the last 3 years and as we move forward into the next school year. So this is how we're going to break it down. We have 6 parts. I'm going to give you the overall technology profile of what we have in Pelham, the instructional technology goals, our department and staffing, some projects from this year, the highlights for the budget, and then we'll go through the line by line. So it should be pretty straightforward. So this is our technology profile. This includes wireless access points, physical locations, et cetera. So one of the things that I actually started on the bottom right is our physical locations. That has actually gone up with the expansion of the business office, the new administrative location. They're going to be actually expanding that administrative location and the addition of Glover Field. So that's 3 additional locations that we brought online over the last 2 years. In addition to that, our department manages over 70 software titles for students and staff. So that's also a part of that technology profile. These are our instructional technology goals. These were approved last year by the state. They were presented to the Authentic Learning Committee. What these technology goals is that it's the core of our department's work, but it's also to supplement the strategic plan. So we have the strategic plan, which encompasses all of Pelham, but within our world, we try to use this to help move that strategic plan forward. So the 3 major goals being curriculum instruction, digital citizenship and fluency, and more importantly, data privacy and security as we move forward for the next 3 years. You've heard me talk about this before. We actually contract, like Mr. Ricky said, through BOCES. We're a part of the Lyrics called Managed IT program. So what that means is we have a few on-site technicians, but we get most of our services provided to us from the cloud. So over 50% of our incidents are actually resolved remotely. Where we don't need someone to physically come in. You've actually seen that with our parent student help desk, which you're going to see some metrics on today. So that's just a reminder of what that actually looks like. And then this is the staffing of our actual department's organizational chart. So when you look on your left, when you look on the green side, that's what that MIT vertical looks like. The blue is a direct report to me that's actually staffed by Pelham, and the red are instructional supports that I oversee within the district.
John, just really quickly on that one, would you mind pointing out a couple of the newer staff pieces that we've added to your department over the last couple of years?
Sure. So over the last 2 years, there's 2 people that we added. So if you take a look on the left-hand side, we've actually promoted someone from what we call a junior network specialist, from a network specialist to an associate network specialist. That's Andrew Castillo. It gives him more back-end management within like servers, software, and stuff like that. He has a little bit more oversight over the junior network specialists, which we added, which was John O'Brien. And we've also added the instructional technology specialist, and she goes K through 12, Alicia Del Mastro. So those are our 2 new additions into that area. This is just something for you to look at within the chart. So when you look at the left, that's the current tickets that have been closed over the school year, 2,229, and the ones that are remained open are 2,182. You're like, wow, that seems like a high number. There's a lot of devices that we send out for repair that take a couple weeks, but we have a closure rate of, we're really excited to announce that it's actually a day for a lot of our incidents. So that's really great work to our staff, and we're lucky to have everyone that we have to support that work.
What are those 2 sort of spikes? Is that the beginning of the school year?
Beginning of the school year.
Right.
Yeah, so September obviously being the busiest. And you're going to actually notice that there was a larger spike around October, November. That's when we actually onboarded all of our K-5 parents into the portal for the elementary report card. So we received over, like, I think 240 support tickets within 24 hours, but we were able to actually resolve all of those within 48. So that's a big testament to our team, and I think it's a good service that we provide for our community and for our parents as well. This is just something for you to look at. This is what it looks like for the student parent help desk. There have been 455 tickets actually opened this year. On the right-hand side, it actually shows you by building who's opening those tickets, and you're going to notice the highest incidents come from the elementary schools because that's where we're onboarding our elementary report card portal.
Who's blue? Who's the blue one?
It's Hutchinson. It's also.
Largest enrollment.
But when you look at that, it's also our largest enrollment out of elementary school. So
Yep.
that seems to be correct. So these are just major projects from this year. I don't want to dwell on all of them, but one of the big things I want to point out is that it's a lot of joint efforts with the Business and Facilities Office. So thank you to John, Jim, and their staff with a lot of the work that they've been able to provide for us. There's a lot of big work in data this year for our department, branching minds being one of them. That was a very, very heavy lift for the MTSS work that the district is doing. I know Jim Baker, Sharon Hanlon, a lot of our staff have been working really, really hard to get that working. And one of the biggest things we did this year was the elementary report card. The whole revamping of it, the deployment of it, getting teachers trained to input their grades into there, and then getting the parent portal out. It was a lot of work that was done on the back end, and our new parent-teacher conference software that we launched for the middle school, high school. So that was a lot of work that was there. And the other thing that I wanted to point out was our ongoing work with our computer science and digital fluency standards. Those are not going away. Those are still new. All the work we're doing around that, and the informational night we did for the parents and for the Board of Ed work session in there. So let's go into highlights for what this budget's going to include for this year. So we're going to continue the work of Alicia Del Mastro for the third consecutive year. Her work is pivotal to the success of what we have in Pelham. I can't speak enough to how important that role and that position has been over the last 3 years, because it's not just student-facing, it's teacher-facing, parent-facing. She's been able to do a lot of that work, and she spans K through 12. It's not just a 6 through 12 or a K through 5 role, it's a K through 12 role, and she's been very vital to creating a lot of those instructional pieces that helps our district move forward. We're going to have ongoing support for the computer science and digital fluency standards work. This summer, we're going to be doing ongoing professional development for our teachers, and we're going to be completing our gap analysis. So that way, as we plan for the 24 school year, we're going to have a good plan in place for how we want to roll those out. We're going to have to start support and planning for new online testing. As Dr. Bowman was talking about, I know some members here were at our Authentic Learning Committee to see what that's going to look like. So we're going to start looking at different ways that we can start to prepare our students for some of the different tools and strategies that are on here. The good news is that we're already doing a lot of that work this year, especially within our K through 5 with our new keyboarding program. So we're hoping to continue that work. We're going to maintain the parent-student help desk from the Lyric. They have said that they want to continue that work. It's been a great success for us in Pelham. So that's going to keep going. I know Dr. Champ spoke about the continued refresh of our one-to-one program in 5th and 9th grade. So that way, no device in the district is older than 4 years. So we're going to continue that. And new for this year is we're going to be refreshing all of the faculty K through 12 of their mobile devices, which haven't been refreshed since before COVID. So at the high school, those are the laptops. At the elementary school staff, those are currently Chromebooks right now. We're actually looking into getting them Windows-based laptops as well. We're piloting a few things for them, so we're still looking to see how that's going to look. The other thing that we're going to be doing as well, and we'll talk about it in the budget, is the ongoing evaluation support of our software shifts to the Lyric and other BOCES. I'll talk about that in our previous spends of why we're doing that, the benefits to doing that, and so forth. Continued support of Ed Law 2D and data privacy. There's a lot of cybersecurity things that we're paying attention to. I know Dr. Champ and our admin cabinet had the chance to go to the Lyric for a tabletop work session, and we actually got to take a look at our incident response plan and what would happen in the middle of an incident response plan. A lot of it is, John, can you help us, please? But of course, there's shared roles and responsibilities within our admin cabinet. So we really got to run through a lot of those exercises, and it helps us even with the business office as well. The last one is our district-wide camera and infrastructure project. I know Mr. Ricky was talking about the grant that we received. That's going to be a big, big lift for our department. That will bring all of our building infrastructures up and current. The reason why we weren't able to do a lot of the different cameras and different accesses and so forth is a lot of the cameras that you're looking at now that are on the outside work on something called, power over Ethernet. So our switches right now are almost end of life, and there's not a lot of PoE capacity to power up a lot of cameras. So the more cameras you add on, the more power it's drawing from what we call a switch. So we can add on certain, a certain amount, but we need to upgrade our back end in order to upgrade all of the cameras that we are looking to add within the district. So that will be an ongoing project in partnership with business and facilities. Yes, blinky boxes. But let's talk about the budget. We're going to go into the line by line. So one of the things that I like to do with our technology budget, and you saw me do this in our Board of Ed work session, is I like to start with the why. What's needed for students and teachers to actually succeed? We want to align it to our Pelham instructional technology goals and our strategic plan. Again, looking at ways to move our purchasing into Lyric and BOCES, our ed law compliance and ongoing support of data privacy and security, and what are the infrastructure and maintenance needs that are needed for us as we move forward. So let's start, if you go into your budget books to C23. All right, let's start with lines 150 and 160. So it's computer instructional salaries and support staff. That's mine and the support staff of, as you saw, that's Jim Baker, Janet Egan, and also included within there is budget funding for interns that are normally funded through BOCES. So this is one shift that didn't happen last year. We allocated a certain amount of money to pay for our interns, which are normally paid through BOCES. Last year, they said they weren't going to continue that program, so I earmarked that money in a local fund for us to be able to pay that, but BOCES ended up coming forward to be able to front that, which is why we didn't have to spend all of that money, which is why you see a little bit of a peak, an underspend on last year. This year, we're being told the same thing again, which is why I'm earmarking money to be able to pay for that. When we go to 220 and hardware, so when you look at the 21-22 actual spend, the adopted budget, and if you go across through the preliminary budget, this computer hardware is for like last-minute laptops, desktops, iPads, wireless hotspots, etc. And you're going to notice that that's also an underspend. So one of the things that I'm trying to do, instead of purchasing directly through that 220 code, is I try to purchase as much as I can through BOCES. When we get into the Lyric RFS, the reason why we try to purchase as much as we can through BOCES is because of the state aid we receive on the back end from that procurement. So that way it helps save us money and we get the state aid in the following year. When we move to 400 and 420, it says network consultant, maintenance contracts, Xerox print management, appliance subscriptions, E-rate consultants, and et cetera. When you look at the 2021-22 actual spend and why that's actually a little bit higher, what we did for the Hutchinson School was we actually bought some technology and infrastructure items in there, so that way they didn't have to be charged against the bond. So we actually did that with a local purchase, so that way it brought the cost of the bond down in that 21-22 school year. But as you see, that's a pretty easy increase as you go across. When you look at the staff development part, the 420, and it looks like a 200%. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look between both here. When you look at the increase of $1,000 for the 50%, I had to earmark some money for our gap analysis work that Alicia's going to be leading this summer with a couple of teachers. So I earmarked some of that money within there for her to be able to do that over the summer. For 450 for materials and supplies, again, you're going to notice we allocated $19,000. We're requesting 22, which is a $3,000 increase. This is for Chromebook cords, cases, replacements, flash drives. These are smaller technology items that we use, and this covers the entire district. And again, you're going to notice that in the 21-22 actual spend, it's lower because that's something that we also try to procure through BOCES as much as we can. And then let's go into number 460, which is one of the largest ones that I'm responsible for in the local budget. Again, you'll notice that it's a 23.2% decrease. We're asking for $74,000 this year. Again, and that's because those are continued shifts from the local line into BOCES. So that's more stuff that we're continually looking to move over, so that way we don't have to purchase that locally. We're doing that through BOCES, and a lot of that is because of the state aid that we get on the back end. And with Ed Law 2D, when we purchase through our Lyric and our BOCES, they actually hold on to the contract. So if we were to purchase any software locally that requires us, where the vendor is collecting student personally identifiable information, we actually have to have a parent's bill of rights rider signed by the vendor. When we purchase through BOCES, these are already vetted vendors, which is why even when there's software requests within district, if the BOCES doesn't have an agreement, we're generally saying no because we know that that's going to be safe, that it's been vetted by BOCES. I'm going to stop there because that's all of C23. I'll allow anybody to ask a question.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Sure.
About hardware, Chromebooks, laptops. Out of curiosity, what's the lifespan of the smart boards? Are we kind of
Sure. So
are we reaching end of life there, or
no, we're not. So very luckily, we've been able to phase in pretty good. Again, some of this like even predates me over the 5 years I'm here, but we've been able to replace about 20 to 30 every single year. And they don't go by years, they go by actual like hours that they're on. The next time I could see us having to do another big spend on interactive TVs and displays would probably be in another 2 to 3 years. And that would be for some of our older aging like interactive TVs. The nice thing about these flat panel TVs that we've been putting up like in Hutchinson that you saw is that we plan to get at least at minimum 5 years out of them. So they're excellent and they're brighter. And I think they're a lot more durable than the older smartboard displays that you saw where it was just like a plastic board, a separate, almost a separate projector just like this that you see hung up here, because the maintenance and the ongoing support of that is actually pretty expensive. Yeah, sure.
So these numbers are not necessarily very large in comparison year to year, given that you're buying this very expensive equipment. Is it because you're shifting them throughout a number of years?
It's that, and you have to also remember that when we do our large-scale purchasing for equipment every year, it's done through something called an installment purchase agreement, an IPA. That hasn't been brought forth yet. I know I'll be working with Mr. Ricky. It goes actually before the board in the next couple of months. It will be for a set number, and it's actually something that we finance over 4 years. When you look at the Lyric RFS, I think it's going to be under 611 for this current year, not for next year. You'll notice that there's a line item for the actual payment of that over the 4 years, and that's where we actually do that, is in there.
how's pricing for hardware these days? Obviously, there's been a lot of supply chain constrictions. Have prices come back down to earth, or are they?
That at first they're still high, especially when it comes to higher level stuff like infrastructure, like switches, wireless access points. Those are still very expensive. Surprisingly, Chromebooks have actually gone down a tiny bit because they're able to, the processors aren't as hefty as what you need within some of the larger items, but some of our larger ticket items, they're a lot more expensive for sure. We're good?
You mentioned this, most of the spending goes through BOCES.
It does, yep.
Does that show up in a different?
It will. So I'm going to ask if you can actually turn your, if you could, let's see, I think it's Appendix 5 for BOCES. I think it's going to be the second or third page. What I'm going to actually ask you to do, it's called the Lyric RFS. Am I correct? I think it's like 3 or 4 pages in. It's Appendix 5, and then once you go to Appendix 5, I think if you flip over like 3 or 4 pages, it'll start. It has like an orange and blue bubble on the top.
Yeah.
Okay. It starts with 1 of 10. Thank you. All right. So let's explain everything that of how this works. I know for a lot of you it will be new. So there's 5. What BOCES calls coasters that are in there. So how do these coasters work? There's 5 of them. There's 444, which is distance learning, 510, which is instructional technology, 554, which is model schools, 611, which is management services, and 612, which is IntelliPath. So what do all these different coasters mean? And these coasters are actually set up by the state. The coasters are laid out differently because higher percentages of state aid are reflective of how much it impacts student usage and student teaching and learning. So for example, when you look, let's take COSER number 444, which is called distance learning. The average state aid reimbursement on that is about 51%. If we were to look at COSER 612, which is on the last page of the RFS, that state aid reimbursement is 29%, approximately 29%. And that's because those purchases don't directly impact student teaching and learning. So our highest one that you would see in there, not surprisingly, is 510, which is instructional technology, which comes in at 56%. So let's take a look at this RFS. We can run through this so that way you're able to get like a full understanding. You can ask any questions you have of me on any of the line items you see within here. So distance learning, 411, you're going to see 3 items in there: iTutor, GradPoint, and our GCN online compliance training. That's used in district for our training. 510, which is instructional technology. This includes a lot of those instructional technology software pieces that used to be in our local line, but we have now moved over to BOCES. Good examples of that include Padlet, Tinker, Castle Learning, Delta Math, Go Guardian, Dreambox, and IXL. There's even more that we used to purchase locally, but we've moved them over into here. So that's why you'll see sometimes a 0 on the left for 22, 23, and then you'll see a price for 23, 24, is because I used to pay for those locally, but we moved those over into BOCES. Over the last, what I want to say is probably 4 years since I've been here 5, but over the last 4 years, we've moved over $100,000 worth of software purchasing into these BOCES contracts. So that's why you're seeing the 510, and that's quite an extensive list that you're looking at in there.
Generally, when you shift a license or a procurement over to BOCES, how much cheaper does it become?
That's a really good question. I won't move. So when we move it over, there's actually a little bit of a negotiation with the vendor, right? For a cost savings, it's about 3 to 4%. Sometimes it can be a little bit higher, but when you get the state aid reimbursement, it ends up being an offset and a cost savings to the district in the next year. So for example, if we were to look at something that we were purchasing for about $1,000 this year locally, and it costs $1,200 to purchase it through the Lyric, but you get a 54% state aid reimbursement in the following year, it still becomes a savings for us. So, but that doesn't happen very, very often. It's usually neutral or it's a little cheaper. I think it's higher 3 to 4% of the time. It's not very, very often. So 510 is our instructional tech. When you look in there, you could take a look at those different items. The way that they're listed in there, and I know it can be a little bit confusing, that's how the vendors actually set up their licensing structures. So sometimes it's by building, sometimes it's by the amount of students you have. So that's why sometimes that can be a little confusing, but if you had any questions on anything that's specific in there, you can feel free to reach out to me. Let's go to, I'm sorry, I'm like scrolling all over here. Let's go to 554, which is model schools. And again, this is a membership where we have to belong to the BOCES in order to buy certain software. That kiosk that you're seeing under the instructional services and software over there is what they charge the district in order to purchase. They do the procurement and they do the negotiations on behalf of the district for all the different licensing. And the TLI, that Technology Lead Institute, that's a professional development service that we belong to as a district. 611 is management services, so that's a lot of back-end stuff like our local area network, remote backup, ClassLink, Infinite Campus. A lot of the business office, our finance system is paid through here. Test scoring, IEP Direct, Guidance Direct, our RIC1, our state data validation, data warehousing. So it's not just stuff that I directly oversee. There are other areas of how the Pelham, how Pelham operates that falls within the RFS, but it still comes through our BOCES lines on here. So that's number 611. And then when you look at 612 and telepath services, that's our VoIP system. And that's also shared with Verizon. So that's the entire BOCES RFS. Now what you're looking at on there, it looks like it's a little bit lower from last year into this year. That's because it doesn't include our current IPA, which is how you're asking how do we purchase the large bulk of our equipment. That will be put into that payment into for next year. It's just not included on here yet. That's the only thing that's not on this RFS as of right now. Were there any questions when it comes to anything within the RFS? If there were, Dr. Champ, you can,
Of course. Thank you.
but if there's, I'm here, you know where to find me, and I want to thank all of you again for your ongoing support. I think we do a really great job delivering services for our district, our community, and more importantly, our students. So thank you again.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Outstanding.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Was
Oh, I'm
there
sorry.
a Point of clarification?
There's one clarification, I'm sorry. I didn't know this on Appendix 5. If you take a look, I think it's on the first page. And I'm sorry, because I look at the RFS. I'm trying to look, oh, okay, here it is. If you go to computer services, so it's 2110-490 under instructional services. There's a new installment purchase agreement. It actually says not on RFS, that's 100,000. That's on there. That's that ongoing payment that we have on there. So it's already accounted for.
So it's not on the RFS, but it is in this
Correct.
cover sheet, meaning
So
it
it's
is
already accounted for within the budget. It
Perfect.
just doesn't show on the RFS as of yet.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
All right. John, thank you. Incredible, really incredible work. Congratulations again. And I want to thank the administrators again for coming. Before you leave, I do want to also recognize Dr. Thompson was recognized by the New York State Council of Social Studies Supervisor of the Year, another award-winning administrator in our midst. So congratulations to that. With that, administrative team, thank you for being here tonight. You guys are free to go and rest up, and we'll see you back tomorrow. Thank you for being here and for all the work that you did to lead into this. John, thank you for your presentation.
You don't need the laptop anymore?
I don't think so. No, at this point, I think we'll just have
Okay.
Jim's going to talk a little about athletics, and then we'll go through that, and then certainly go back to any of the broader questions from the board. So.
Okay. Next up is athletics. And you'll see that in tab number 5, co-curricular and athletics. At least in my book, it's a right-hand side tab, if that helps. And the budget that's being, I'm sorry, if I can move ahead, or if I just want to rush anybody either. So the budget that's before the board really is a current services budget, but it really talks about or addresses two changes that you could look at. The first is the increase reflected on historical costs for the officials' fees, as you see. When we have officials, those are coordinated through a regional, actually BOCES does it here and other places do it. But the cost of officiating is just more expensive right now, so that reflects the change in those rates and our historical experience, as you'll see it. And then additionally, where else do we have the increase? I was looking at it.
And there's, while you're looking for that, I know that there's been, I think we've maybe even seen it in some of the NYSBA newspapers. There's official shortages all over the place. And the
Yeah,
costs
people don't
are-
want to be officials.
Costs
so,
are increasing significantly.
They've got to do a little bit something more to tempt them to come into the profession. On supplies and materials, you see an increase, and in bold there on the right, it reflects that it's for uniforms and helmets to make sure we have the proper equipment. And I'm sorry, I jumped. The first page is for co-curriculum stipends, and that's related to, that's page C25. And that the backup for that you could start finding that on C27.
Yeah, and again, those go back to contractually based stipends for coaching.
Yes, and those reflect, thank you, Dr. Champ, that reflects what's been negotiated contractually. And then if you look in there, you kind of also see a little bit of what we shared before as far as number of years of service. So the rate of pay for a coach or that stipend can vary depending on years of service in that position as that coach.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know that's always a question that comes up annually for folks who don't understand how the pay scales work. Our coaching stipends also are similar to the teaching pay stipends in that there's an experience component that's built into it. So we do, I think the district has traditionally worked very hard to have parity,
Yes.
gender parity in the coaching stipends. So I just want to make that point, because that's a continual.
So a first-year basketball coach on the boys' team would be paid less, with 1 year experience, would be paid less than a 10-year veteran coach of the girls' varsity basketball team, if they were both
Right.
basketball,
So-
based on that.
I have a question about that. So that's come up a lot over the years, but in the recent years, the question that I get a lot as board member, now having middle school and high school students playing these sports, is, like, do we pay as much as the other districts? Like, when we have trouble getting a good coach for a particular team, or there's a vacancy, like, how do we compare? And it must be that Pelham pays so much less for coaching. So can you speak to, like, I've never known the answer to that. I've seen
Sure.
this chart, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know the relevance of that one way or another.
I'll be honest, I don't have that information, but I know many times there are resources of information that we could look into,
Okay,
and that's something that we could certainly look into and share with the board when and if we find that information. We'll report it back one way or the other, if we can find it or if we can't find that information.
obviously, you know, I love athletics, but our priority is to get the best teachers, but
Sure.
athletics is a really important component, and
the
we
student
know,
experience,
and the
for
student
sure.
experience, and we know that Pelham cares about its sports quite a bit and likes winning, and we do have a good record of winning, but I do think that there's at least a perception out there that maybe we're not paying our coaches as much, and I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think it's worthy of just kind of having a sense of how we compare to others for that reason.
Yeah, we can do some research into that.
Interesting.
Dr. Garcia, I mean, half that, he's not here.
Oh, he's not here, let's
Right,
assign
he
it to
stepped
Dr.
out.
Garcia.
But he may have information he could pull from hiring sources.
Yeah.
Well, exactly,
Yes.
and we do have resources through BOCES. They conduct various annual surveys and comparative reports that we can source, for sure. And then what we're also seeing is, again, our transportation is increasing for athletics. You see that in transportation, but that just reflects what we're expecting, the increase related to CPI once that final rate is negotiated, and past experiences. And busing is expensive.
Hopefully it becomes more reliable too. Between the buses and the refs, it seems like there's been a lot of canceled.
Yeah, I know, and one thing I don't want to jinx myself, but I have heard less about no-shows for busing this year. Last year,
This year
certainly.
is better than last year.
Yeah,
but-
last year, it's difficult, and the bus companies even work with the best of intentions, and then their drivers don't show up.
Yeah.
If you would like additional athletics information, or if you have questions about athletics, I certainly will try to answer it, or get you the answer to that information. Yes. Oh, okay, thank you. That's, what tab is that in? So in J19, thank you, Jackie, there is some comparative information in Appendix 6. Appendix 6, J19.
That's a total cost, not a
That's the total,
breakdown. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So
Okay. Like
I-
the way per pupil, like what we spend per pupil as compared to others, this is like what do we spend in total on athletics as compared to
Correct,
other
and I
districts.
think you make a great point. Certainly, every school district's, I would venture to assume every school district's inventory of offerings differs.
Yeah.
Very much the same, but you'll find minor variances.
Yeah, yeah.
Jim, I know we were talking earlier about that we're making also an adjustment in the supervision rate.
Yes.
I can't remember which line that was covered in, but I just wanted to make the board aware of that.
Mhm. Yep. in the officials line too, where, yeah, so that's also reflected in that officials line, that reflects.
So you're
That's
talking
just that
about supervision for athletic events?
Supervision
like
for
how many-
athletics.
Correct.
How many
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
staff you have
Is that
Yeah.
present, yeah.
chaperones?
Yes.
Yeah, it's our security monitors, teachers, who, depends on who is. We know that we had been taking a look at that this year to see where we fell regionally. And certainly we're struggling to find folks to supervise. So what we proposed in this budget is is based on an increased rate, moving it up to something that's regionally.
Right, we've
Comparable.
benchmarked ourselves. The athletic director did a lot of work on that. And I think we found ourselves in a place where the argument can't be made that other places were outrageously lower than where would be in other places.
Right, so that would be establishing a stipend for the different types of games,
It would-
be it modified.
Correct, it would be
varsity,
an hourly rate for
Based on
for
an
each
hourly
event.
rate at a much higher rate than what was being paid. I think we based it on about a $30 an hour rate, which is pretty good increase from.
I think what they found was, again, different events have different duration and different workloads. And based upon that, it was easy to fill certain positions and almost impossible to fill others. And with this, we believe we'll be able to be more competitive and to get that supervision that we really want to have at those events.
Yeah, and I would say too, we certainly appreciate the staff that work those events.
Oh,
I
they're
know
great.
Jim, works very closely with them, as does the athletics office. And they had raised the issue with us a little while back, and we're glad to have the opportunity to include that in this budget.
There's been some gentle arm twisting, and people have been really, really great about stepping forward,
They have,
to be
yeah.
perfectly honest. And
It's a great staff.
that's all of our staff too, our
Yeah.
monitors and our teachers have stepped
Yeah.
forward at different times.
Yep, and the best part is when the kids know the staff in those events, things go a lot better all around. So,
'Cause there was somebody that asked about a swim meet and that there was a problem.
Yes, yeah.
And then you were saying it was like maybe a chaperone
Mhm.
issue or something, but that, you're saying that's,
That would be included in, if we needed a chaperone to take a student
Uh-huh.
to a swim meet such as that, they would be paid it.
and that's the co-curricular stipends line, is that what you're talking about?
That's what I was asking, which,
No, you
Which
would
exact
find
line?
that in that official
That
fees line,
official
the
fees.
132 line. So it's,
yeah.
that reflects the officials and it reflects a modification in that rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's increased 28.8%, or 61%, I guess, budget to budget.
And I guess the good thing
I
is.
mean, it's not a huge number, really, but
Right.
it's I guess it's a relatively large increase.
If we don't have, if we're not paying for the busing, we're paying for the officials and the supervision.
Okay. So hopefully that addresses that
Yeah,
issue.
that's the indication that we've been told is having a regionally comparable rate would go a long way towards helping us to staff our games.
Okay, thank you.
All
Well,
right, so
that-
that's the end of the
yeah.
line by line, but certainly know that members of the board may have questions from kind of the bigger, broader questions that we didn't get to tackle on the front end, so certainly open it up for that. Or additional details too, and if we don't have the answers tonight, we'll certainly do what we can to get those for you.
Absolutely. I think the benefit now is there's a couple more times where the board will meet. And I think the board is a nice opportunity to take this in, digest a little bit of it,
Yeah.
and then please reach out to myself, Jackie, Dr. Champ. We will endeavor to get you that information and share it broadly, whether we choose to do it at the public meeting in response, or however we want to do it, but we'll do that. I envision us working with the Finance Committee and having those meetings through this budget cycle as well. And the budget is really, it's about forwarding the board's policy for the upcoming year and how to implement the board's vision for that.
I just have a question for you, Jim. The grant we receive for security, it's
Yes.
just, we can't pay headcount, it's just for like infrastructure and,
Yes, so it's just about $1.3 million. The application was to use it for security cameras, the back end portion for that, and access controls as well. Our wireless access control system, it's really obsolete. It's become It does a great job blocking doors, which is what you want, but it's less reliable when people want to come in a door and they've got a badge. They've got to come in through other doors if it's wireless. So we want to replace that system. It's time for it to be replaced. And that's what this grant is going to allow us to do.
Yeah, I'm just asking because on the budget, we have going from, for our terminus, going from 0.5 to a whole head count. So I
For
wanted to know,
Alzheimer's.
like, can we possibly use that money, to offset some of our own expenses?
Sure. In this case, that would be one instance where you wouldn't be able to do that.
And do we know approximately how many hours we've used them so far? Or just-
He's here, let's call it 2.5 days a week.
Okay, so
but
it's-
1 week it's 2 days, the next week it's 3 days.
So it's an actual person, not
And
like
is
a
it-
service?
And it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
person.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
And we had the same model last year. And last year, we were sharing with another district, and that district went for the 1.0 this year, and they took our person last year.
So now we'll get a full person
So
all
we-
day. like-
Well, you'll love this one. So we're doing the same thing this year. That superintendent went to another district who we're sharing him with this year. And if I'm going to read the tea leaves, he's probably going to ask for a 1.0 as
I'm
well.
sure.
But
Right. So it's a
again, I
trend.
think we found value in it. I think with
Yeah.
with our administrative team and our staff, and I'm repeating myself, I know, but it's about building our capacity and getting our programs run. Today is a staff development day. I think there were 22 people. We were in this room with the Village of Pelham Fire Department. They did training for us, for Stop the Bleed training for our nurses, a number of our monitors and custodians. So I think, him being able to coordinate that effort, which frankly, he also coordinated in his other district. So, which is really great. But we've got some pictures of that event. We'll be sharing that, and I know the village is sharing them too. But it was great. It was, again, a nice event and building more capacity like we keep talking about. And that's the goal. Unfortunately, we keep hearing more about the troubling things that are happening, and we want to be mindful of that.
Just a global comment too, and it's just a small one, but as we talked about things that have evolved, or in the way you started the presentation, you mentioned nurses, and I know we're gonna get to Ms. Holtz's portion at another meeting, but it wasn't that long ago when we didn't have nurses in all the buildings either. So in the same way that we've added psychologists, and we've, a school counselor now at the elementary school, we've added resources, I'd like to add the nurse, the addition of nurses over time, and now we're, supporting a nurse coordinator is really a true enhancement to kind of the health and safety of our students. I still remember receiving a petition from parents in the elementary school saying, like, our kids have peanut allergies, like, how can we not have a full-time nurse in the building, and
Right.
it wasn't that long ago, so. Kudos to the district for previous boards for continuing to support that.
I have a sort of overall question. Outstanding level of rigor here, as always. Thank you. But sort of stepping back a little bit, as you were going through the kind of revenue side of the district, I guess two things kind of stood out. Two fortunate things stood out. One is the fact that state aid is up $2 million. Another is interest income. We're getting $1 million from that as well. So kind of good things are sort of happening on the revenue side. And then when you sort of combine that with, $2 million of the budget is CapEx. It's being funded from reserves. So that's good. And you also sort of consider that thanks to the district's very effective management of costs, we generally run at a surplus at the end of the year, sort of historically. When you sort of put all those things together, I guess the thing that I'm trying to reconcile in my head is why, unless there is something on the expense side that's kind of disproportionately up, I guess why the tax increase is higher, and that's why I asked the question earlier about last year versus this year. What is it about the environment, given the good stuff that's happening on the revenue side, that means we need a sort of that the tax increase is proposed to be higher in this coming budget than it was last year?
Well, I think part of what you want to look at is the program that's being added with the additional dollars that we're seeing, certainly. While the state aid, the district, in my opinion, has been entitled to all these years, it's just a matter of time where the legislature and the governor has finally reflected it. Interest income is terrific, and as I look at it, it's almost as if the interest income addresses our utility increases that we've seen, because we've experienced some other cost increases related to a higher interest rate environment. But as we look at the budget, and I think it's part of our long-range planning that we really want to be mindful of, we're looking out many years. You can do things one year, but it gives you less maneuverability out in future years. And working in a tax cap environment, we know that 2% cap it's there. The legislature's made it very clear. There's not a lot of appetite to go near it in any which way, to adjust it to CPI or anything else. It's pretty much a brick wall from what I've listened to when I hear the legislators talk about it. So we really want to work hard to be mindful of how we address our expenditures and our recurring revenues. There's some costs that just grow beyond, at a level that can be beyond the CPI and that 2% level, certainly. This year, our health insurance is growing at 8%. And we've been very fortunate in other years, but it's 8% this year. We're in a very efficient consortium with a number of other districts, and in that regard, we've grown at a slower rate than many other school districts. But that cost is growing, and what they've found is that the trend is growing. It's drugs, maintenance drugs, and that tends to address or impact the cost of healthcare. Another large expense we have is our pension systems. And the pension systems there are two pension systems, the teacher's retirement system and the employee retirement system. They're both funded very well. And what the state does is every year they have an actuarial study done to determine that level of funding. And then based on that level of funding, they give themselves a corridor to make sure they're at that actuarially accepted funding level. So it's not like we have a control over that number. The state comptroller is the sole fiduciary of the ERS fund. TRS is managed by a fund. But based on that market performance, then the district is really handed a bill based upon what the next year's contribution is going to be. So there could be great variation that we could see there. The tax cap formula does allow for exceptions, if, like I mentioned, if there's a 2% variance. But a 1.5% variance would have on the teacher's retirement system would have a significant impact on your year-to-year growth. And that's just part of, as you said before, keeping some powder dry to make sure you're able to address those needs. Because I don't think you want to run into a situation where there's peaks and valleys. You really want to smooth things out and create predictability. Because for our students, for year in and year out, we want to make sure we can do that. Again,
So last year, we had a slightly higher use of debt service reserve.
we did.
Debt service fund. Debt service.
Yes.
I hear Jackie in my mind saying.
It was 1.955. In my mind, I hear the same voice
Yeah.
when I.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely.
Which is one of the levers that we could still continue to pull.
Yeah,
this
that
year
was.
To
I
lower
was-
that percentage.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. What is the, rationale for why it's lower? The application is lower in the proposed budget of the debt service fund.
Well, I think right now, as you looked at the budget, and this is a starting point, and the board certainly has to have time to reflect upon the budget and take appropriate action. As we look at how the budget was being built, and with the increase in our state aid, I talked about how we're picking up a little bit more state aid on that building aid. We came up with that level of funding here.
Okay.
We believe that there will be additional funds available if that's a lever that the board would want to pull as we move forward through the budget process.
Okay.
I think one of the greatest challenges of all decisions we make as a board, but especially with the budgeting, is making decisions that are appropriate for here and now and our current taxpayers, but also that set future boards up in our district up for success. It doesn't handicap us in any way. And so that's the delicate balance, I think, about how close you are to the tax cap, what money you leave on the table, and how much you keep in reserves, right?
Earlier in the meeting, I talked a little bit about the sustainability of our foundation aid. And certainly, if that's in jeopardy for the following year budget, then there's decisions that have to be made, and you want to make sure you've got some application to smooth things out, and that's where you would look towards using your fund balances. to go ahead and to hopefully address smoothing some of those things out.
So without wishing to put words in your mouth, there's like a little bit of future-proofing kind of in the budget?
Yeah, we try to think about, again, we do that long-range plan exercise every year, kind of a 5-year look, because we want to understand what the impact does. And even this year, when we provided the impact to the board, we want to visually, we give everybody an understanding of what our budget looks like, again, in a forecast model moving forward. Should that state aid hold, and should the state aid fall back? And they have two different implications, right, on what your end of year final results could look like. But again, it's the further out you go, the less predictable. But we've got to be mindful of that. We've got 2,700 students that we've got to be mindful of their education, and certainly you folks are very much more aware of that too. I'm sure you're reminded of it in the store and on the fields and everywhere else.
And I think our contractual obligations going into next year are different than they were last year as well too, because we signed a couple of new contracts,
Absolutely.
agreements,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're in the last year
Yeah.
of many labor contracts. Next year, I think we have at least two large units that are going to need to be negotiated. So there's some variability there. We've all seen it at the grocery store, and I would expect to hear a lot of the same arguments at the table.
I was going to mention, to that point, back in the original PowerPoint, there are a couple graphs that I think really just kind of isolate what those biggest drivers are, which could be useful, kind of to your point, Will. It's the budget categories driving budget to budget change. I think that really kind of lays them out pretty clearly in kind of rank order, and that being our obligations being the starting point, salary and benefits for existing staff. So there's collective bargaining agreements that are already in place. The proposal for the new staff that's included in this budget certainly is an addition. And you can see from there, I think when you look at that $6.8 million spend, $2 million of that is the capital projects. So, some of those, they're kind of the big obvious buckets of what's in there. One of the, and as Jim mentioned, utilities, that's another big increase in transportation. So a lot of that really all adds up. One of the things you'll see too when we get to the PPS budget, and I see it as a good thing because I see it as an investment in our special education population with the staff that's being proposed to be added to the special education department, as well as the student program investment that's built into that. That's going to be another big chunk. You don't see it represented here as a whole, but that was, it's going to be pretty substantial there. I think that was short of $1 million total when you wrap in all of the special education investment increases. So that really kind of rounds out when you take the obligations, the capital, utilities, transportation, special education, that really slices up that pie of the increase and covers it pretty significantly.
Right. So I guess, again, conceptually or philosophically, and I'm not taking a side either way, to the extent that there is wiggle room in the budget, it sort of depends. One way to frame it is to kind of depend upon your appetite for kind of hedging for the future versus kind of being a bit more in the now, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. We'll put up the presentation, but as you look at it, the salary and benefit variance year to year is what, $2.3 million? If 2% on the tax levy is about $1.5 million. So if you roll that forward another year, and if all the other revenue categories hold, you've got to go search to make that balance work. And those are the things that we've got to be mindful of on a long-range basis.
I think there's a fair amount of now in this budget built in just around those contracts, like those set obligations. Like, yes, they roll forward, but they'll be renegotiated, but we know what we know at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the renegotiations are going to be
Tough.
challenging,
Yeah.
for sure.
Can we talk a little bit about process, just from this point forward, just, and also just how the community can give input? I remember last year there was a lot of activity on social media. It's like, are we creating ways that the district can be either out ahead or providing more up-to-date answers, so there's, you know, less speculation on, you know, just, let's just talk about process, because I think that'd be helpful for people to know.
Well, we're going to be at the next two meetings. Will be more line by line.
Yes.
And the third meeting after that will be more budget discussion. So the primary vehicle obviously is the board meetings, hoping that folks tune in. I know Alex is going to try to do a thorough job of, in the board wrap-ups, highlighting the important details and all the attachments and things will be there. So certainly our board meetings, come, attend, watch online, watch for the board wrap-ups. I usually do my usual presentation to the different community organizations and PTAs, et cetera. Certainly, folks are always welcome to email us. I know last year, and we just got the email reminder today, some of the federal funds require seeking public feedback on how to spend the additional foundation aid. So we'll be putting together a survey on that. That was useful for gathering some information last year as far as priorities. Those are kind of the pieces right now of our normal rollout process. I think by having it over 3 nights, it may be good because people may come out of tonight with questions that they can come back next time and answer, or they can send to us via email, and then we can address those at our next meeting. I think having this spread over 3 nights does give us a new opportunity to address those things in a little bit more real time.
If I could add, certainly you're the ambassadors and the leaders of the school district. And we have a finance committee, and we'll be working with finance through this process as well.
Yeah, and maybe if we do get individual email questions that we think are relevant, when we respond, we make those responses public, just to minimize the lack of information or misinformation, whatever it may be, just so that we're as transparent as possible.
And Alex sends out the budget focus, right? There's that gets mailed to everybody's home, which has a lot of detailed information in there as well, so.
And I think one of the most striking slides, and I can't find it now, but, for people who don't have the appetite to, sit through what we sit through, understandably, there's a slide in here that says, if your home is worth X, and it's reassessed at Y, this is what the actual dollars are going to be out of your pocket. Right. And I think for many, many people, that's kind of what they care about, or at least adds a very useful layer of context. Right. So we should begin to
you should look at it, but it's not a particularly happy chart.
Disseminate.
It could be worse.
I'm not gonna comment on. I'm not gonna put any commentary to it. I just think that it's a very helpful tool to form an opinion about the budget.
Yep.
It's also in that also goes in as an insert to the focus, so that will go home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Jim, you mentioned that there's a worksheet too, where people can take their actual home and figure out the actual dollars, because these are examples, which are great, but it's not your
value.
home. Right.
Exactly, that's why we provided it that way. And again, this is just the beginning of the process.
And where does that worksheet live?
It's under taxes, the taxes tab.
Okay, and I'm thinking for
on the
folks that are.
website.
So
website.
we have a PDF ready to, which should be going up shortly, of the budget book. That would be made available to the public, the presentation this evening. Certainly will be put up on board docs. And we try to make all of this information available. The appendices, as you know, have a wealth of information, comparative data as well, to provide you with. Again, I think it addresses many of the questions that have come up over the years. And if there's another look for it, like as we were looking at how we compare in co-curricular and to other districts, those are things we can look at later on. But it's an interactive process for sure, and over 3 nights, I think it gives you an opportunity to be able to do that.
And the board will vote on the budget in mid-April. Do you know?
I believe it's April 18th is the budget adoption. Double check that. But yeah, and I would say that's the other piece, and I'm glad you raised that. I think this is also, I think Jim is always famous for saying, when we present this, it's the superintendent's budget, but when we get to budget adoption, it's yours.
The board's budget.
So between now and then, it's important
we
that
gotta
we
own it.
hear
Yep.
your wishes and input into shaping this. And, I know there's always been great conversation around that. and we'll continue to provide updates. We'll get more specific information in various components of the revenue. Certainly, as we go through the scheduling, staffing process, we'll be able to get more accurate information as well. So Jim and Jackie do a great job of always keeping kind of an ins and outs sheet that we'll provide you with as we move through the process, so that you've got a clear picture of where we started and then what's in there when we get to that adoption.
The other thing, just to add one more way in which we communicate, the candidates forum gets recorded, and I feel like I remember that you've done that presentation. There's been like a recording of the budget presentation.
Right.
And it gets recorded and posted on the website too.
Yeah, we've done it the last
I
couple of
mean,
years.
I know that's right before the vote, but. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to confirm, the 18th was the correct date.
Thank you,
Yes.
Chris. Yep.
May 4th is the candidates forum.
Okay, April 18th is budget adoption. So that's the important piece, that we get any feedback and make adjustments between now and then. So. All right, Jim, Jackie,
Okay.
thank you.
Chris is playing the role of Alex in terms of keeping us
Yes.
on track with our dates.
I'm playing Pauline,
Thank
he's
you.
playing Alex. Okay, so I guess that brings us to.
April 18th is the board meeting?
Pardon?
April 18th?
Yeah, April 18th, that was one of the original ones set. It had to be a Tuesday, I think by regulation, or something having to do with the budget timeline.
Certain number of days before the budget votes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Tax day.
so next we have communications and comments from the public. And I did want to mention, we have received several emails from
Yes.
people about tenure candidates,
Yes.
and we definitely review that and take it
Yes.
very seriously. But do want to welcome people to make comments if you just want to state your name and mailing address.
Yep,
I guess
and you can come
go
over
to
to
this.
this podium. Yep.
Hi, good evening. On a much lighter note, I'm not going to talk budget. Aren't you happy? My name is Cindy Cortine. I'm a member of the CNC, which is the Pelham Citizen Nomination Committee. And I'm here to talk about the current Board of Ed candidate search on budget night. So I'm just going to read this and hope that we find people that are great like you guys all are. The Pelham Citizens Nominating Committee, better known as the CNC, is reaching out to the community to ask for help in identifying and encouraging excellent candidates to run for the Pelham Board of Education. As we know, this year 2 seats are up for election. The Pelham CNC is a nonpartisan organization, the purpose of which is to recruit, interview, and nominate highly qualified candidates for the Board of Education. A Pelham CNC nomination is not an endorsement, it is an assessment that the candidate possesses the qualifications set forth by the New York State, along with the qualifications specific to Pelham as set forth by the CNC. The qualifications, along with the BOE candidate application for CNC nomination, can be found on the website, pelhamcnc.com, and applications will be accepted until 8 p.m. on March 10th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so we're on to, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, five.
You're right, 5 point. Yep.
Okay, 5. Okay, motion, 5.1 is a motion to accept donation. So I'll read this. Resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education does hereby accept the monetary donation of $26,840 for the grant for the school climate project, focus on anti-bullying, and that gratitude be bestowed upon the donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. So can I request a motion to accept this donation?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? No.
Did anyone need a paper agenda? No, okay.
Okay, and I think we can do 5.2 through 5.4 as a consent agenda.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
You know, I'd love to comment on that before we do. I think everyone knows Chris Hodge tendered his resignation to move on to another opportunity. So we're incredibly appreciative that 3 of our current staff are going to be picking up those responsibilities to see us through to the end of the year.
Oh, I see.
So Lynn Sabia actually is a certified physical education teacher, and she's served as an athletic director both here in Pelham and at the college level. So she will be assuming some of the responsibilities. Mark Finnegan, who serves as he's a physical education teacher in the district, longtime coach, but also as the assistant athletic director in various seasons. He's assuming part of the role as well. And Tony Damiano, Antoinette Damiano, the secretary in the athletic director office, is also going to be picking up a portion of that work. So the 3 of them are a rock star team. They've stepped forward and they're willing to do this above and beyond their current responsibilities. So I have full faith with that team that they're going to see us through a really outstanding spring season. We know that they're already aware of, making sure that everything's up and running, coaching spots are filled, field allocation is equitable. And Lynn was already talking to me today about getting the budget details. So I know I know you have it. You'll be passing that on to make sure that order supplies, equipment, uniforms, everything is in order for the spring season, and then also ready to hand off to a new athletic director July 1. And I know Dr. Garcia has already developed our timeline for that search process. We'll be meeting to develop the process for parent, student involvement in that process. So we'll be sharing that with you in the near future and getting that up and running. So we're thankful for them for stepping forward. So that's what the board is being asked to vote on tonight in these personnel items.
Yeah, big thank you to them. Any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? No, the motion carries. And we'll do 6.1 through 6.5 as a consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions on this?
Okay. Nothing significant of note.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? No. Another opportunity for communications and comments from the public.
Budget or general?
In
General.
anything.
Hey, thank you very much. I'll try not to fall over here. Thank you for letting me speak here. My name is John Miller, 322 6th Avenue. As you're probably aware, at the start of the 2022-2023 school year, the U.S. Department of Education released new guidelines warning schools against over-punishing students, and in particular, warning against out-of-school suspensions due to their serious academic and emotional toll on children, and their disproportionate impact on minority students and students with disabilities. These guidelines follow an abundance of studies and reports in recent years from organizations like the American Psychological Association, National Education Association, the School Social Work Association of America, all testifying to these same problems with out-of-school suspensions and the general ineffectiveness of out-of-school suspensions in correcting student behavior. With important decisions coming soon about school leadership, I think it is really important for us to know whether our school district is in line with these guidelines. The Department of Ed's Civil Rights Data Collection provides detailed data about how suspensions have been issued to minority students and students with disabilities for each public school district in the country. However, the latest available data for Pelham schools is from 2017, which is woefully out of date. The world has changed immensely since 2017. And without going into details, I don't think it's appropriate to air the stats publicly because they are so old. The numbers that are up there are concerning, to say the least. As a parent of a student with a learning disability myself, I think it's essential to have current data about our school's disciplinary process and our school's disciplinary record. I would like to know what the schools are doing to abide by the law and to protect students and prevent bias in the disciplinary process. As I stated in a public meeting last summer, as the board was voting on a revised code of conduct, I think an external review of the disciplinary process is merited. The community really deserves an objective assessment of such things as how student infractions are reported, how external suspension hearing officers are selected, how manifestation determination meetings are conducted, and whether there's adequate time in the disciplinary process for fair and thoughtful review of student cases. So I appreciate your thoughtful consideration and your response to this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And just as a point of clarification, Mr. Miller, those, the OCR reports are done. I believe districts are required to submit, I want to say it's on a 5-year cycle.
Okay,
So-
it's been 6 years, so.
Well, COVID happened in between too. So we were notified, I think it was within this school year for submission. I don't know how quickly,
Compliant then?
we're compliant with the data request.
But the data's not available yet.
I don't know.
And when will it be available?
I don't know.
I think it's important for you to provide it, considering
I-
the decisions that are.
And I don't want to get into back and forth, I was just trying to clarify.
Sure.
But please know the district is compliant with the requested data. So it has been submitted as per request of the OCR.
Yeah, we did, we had a board training about some of the disciplinary process not too long ago, and, you know, definitely we want to make sure always, whenever there's a consequence, the goal is to be educational, not punitive. And we definitely take it, you know, very seriously that our process is fair. And I have asked at times for an outside review, and we follow up on that information.
Yeah. And also that it's specific to the case, not assumptions based on identity characteristics.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have the agenda, but I think,
Okay,
I think
that's
we're
it.
on to,
That's it.
motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry.
Mr. President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Yes, do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? No. Thank you.
Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.